Do you guys remember way back in the day when the PlayStation 3 was first revealed? This was supposed to be the official controller for the PlayStation 3. What on earth is this? Sony later would make a statement that it was very clearly designed as a design concept and was never intended to be the final controller, despite what everybody said about it. This will be relevant later, but the PlayStation 3 itself was kind of an enigma when it launched. It was expensive, it had weird marketing to go with it, and then eventually it became really awesome. But the PlayStation 3 and its games had some really interesting Easter eggs. So for the next 3 hours, we're going to be doing all things PlayStation 3 in regards to secrets and Easter eggs and the cool games that came out on it. Now, some of you might not remember that originally the PlayStation 3 launched with a different controller than the controller that would become more standard later on in the PS3 life. The original launch controller was known as 6-axis. That was the official name. Now, PlayStation originally wanted to launch with the DualShock 3, but there was some discrepancies from a lawsuit over who had the rights to haptic feedback in gaming controllers, and I guess Sony wanted to play it safe, so they didn't have vibration capabilities in the launch controller, which then gave us the 6-axis. Instead, the big selling point for the controller was the motion sensing technology, which is tied to an Easter egg that not a lot of people noticed back in the day, but only recently people have started to notice that there was an Easter egg associated with the motion capabilities. But before we get into it, can you guys believe it? We actually have a sponsor today. Us, the Rocket Sloth Boys, making it. Listen, if you're big on soccer, check this out. Are you ready to redefine your soccer experience? Meet UFL, the revolutionary free-to-play football simulation that's changing the game. Built for PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X and S, UFL lets you live the dream of building your own team with real-world players, managing every detail, and competing in a global online league, all without spending a dime. Woo! But UFL is more than just jaw-dropping graphics. It's about fair, skill-based gameplay, no shortcuts, no pay-to-win gimmicks. Your strategy and talent are all that matter, and the best part, your progress is yours to keep with no resets to hold you back. It gets even better too. Adidas has joined UFL as the official global season partner, bringing the exclusive Adidas Team Pass to the game, where you can unlock iconic gear, a custom stadium, and exclusive franchises. Complete in-game quests for unique rewards and enjoy real-world perks like a 15% discount on select Adidas items. Level up your game on and off the pitch. And did I mention the ambassadors? Where legends like Ronaldo are on board, you know this game means business. Why are we fans of soccer or football? For the thrill, the passion, the victories, and UFL brings it all together. It's time to play for football. So what are you waiting for? Download UFL now, take control of your team, and see why everyone's talking about it. The link is in the description. Join the movement today. Now back to the motion sensing technology thing. YouTuber John Glasscock actually did a video on this just a couple of years ago. On the main menu of the game, if you had a 6-axis controller here, if you moved the controller in like the same direction over and over again, the little particles floating around would actually move in that direction. It's pretty cool because whatever direction you swing your controller in, the particles will follow. Now the PlayStation 4 and the PlayStation 5 would have particle themes on them. However, neither controller would do this if you swung it around. So it was something that only worked on the original PlayStation 3. This was a pretty cool tool for a lot of PlayStation 3 owners because it then became an easy way to tell if a PlayStation 3 controller you bought from some weird person on eBay was in fact a legitimate PlayStation 3 controller and not some like cheap knockoff one. There were a few other little secrets that the PlayStation 3 had that not a lot of people realized. There was a way you could test the fan that was inside of your PlayStation 3 by just hitting certain buttons at the same time, and it was a cool way to not only test your fan in your PlayStation 3, but also it would kind of, blow any dust out of your system as well. You just had to power off your PlayStation 3, then hold the eject button and switch on the power button at the same time, and that baby would rev up like a hairdryer. You could even flip the little logo too on the PlayStation 3 if you wanted to have it mounted up vertically for whatever reason. So yeah, you could have this facing any way you wanted. But the PS3 was also really cool because you could connect pretty much any controller to the PS3 and it would work as well. Like if you have a PS5 controller, you can straight up plug that in and you are good to go. Surprisingly, there are some drawbacks, like you can't sometimes access the home menu with the home button. Also, if a game requires you to have the motion capabilities of the 6-axis controller, you have to have a 6-axis controller. It's kind of interesting because eventually they would remove the whole motion thing in the controller and sell the DualShock 3, but that still meant if you had the DualShock 3, you couldn't beat those games without the 6-axis. Also, I just wanted to point out, while we're kind of just talking highly about the PlayStation 3 before we really dive into some of the game Easter eggs, 7 controllers. You can have 7 controllers connected at the same time to your PlayStation. Why? I don't know, but it was something you could do. Now, when it comes to the PlayStation 3 and its legacy, The Last of Us actually ended up being the 3rd highest selling game on the PlayStation 3, which was a really big deal for a first-party title. And not only is there a hidden PlayStation 3 in this PlayStation 3 game, but there's other interesting Easter eggs from The Last of Us as well. So let's start here, and then, look at everything else. During the early part of the PlayStation 3's life, things weren't going too well. It was losing the console war against the Xbox 360. Though, towards the end of the generation, PlayStation 3 started to pick up momentum and really started to make a pretty big comeback. But I think The Last of Us was this final piece in the puzzle that pushed the PlayStation 3 in the direction of finally actually winning the console wars during this gen. More importantly, I think the fact that The Last of Us was kind of a great closer for the life of the PlayStation 3 made a lot of people jump ship when it was time to look into what console to buy for the next generation. I mean, Xbox One was doing some dumb stuff.
Xbox, watch TV. TV. Watch TV. TV.
So, PlayStation 3 at the end of the day had a pretty decent lineup all in all, and things looked just better on the PlayStation side of things. So yeah, it makes sense that The Last of Us was such an integral part of this generation, despite the fact it released in 2013, a few months before the new generation would begin. Tying this to the fact that zombie hype was at an all-time high. I mean, The Walking Dead was like the most popular it had been at this point, pretty much. I don't know, people were just really into zombies at this time, and The Last of Us just did something different than a stereotypical zombie game. It added a compelling narrative. And there was also a really cool world to explore. And on top of that, were really cool Easter eggs hidden in this game as well. Like, for instance, at the start of the chapter Hometown, if you look around Sarah's room, there's some interesting things like posters or whatever. But one of the posters actually has members of the Naughty Dog development team themselves, which is kind of cool. They're the developers putting themselves in the game. Also, if you've explored a bit, you might have seen a poster or maybe a billboard somewhere else. There's DVD cases too of a film parody series called Dawn of the Wolf. It's supposed to be kind of a play on the Twilight Saga, where it's like vampire romance theme, but they kind of spun it around for their own taste here. Also, during the chapter Hometown, if you go into the living room of Joel and Sarah's house, look right there. Zoom, enhance. That is a PlayStation 3 console on the shelf under the television set. I love this. The PlayStation 3 showing up in a PlayStation 3 game. How meta is that? That's actually not the only PlayStation 3 hidden here. There's another one in Larry's TV, stereo, and electronics store that Ellie passes through during the Lakeside Resort chapter. You can actually see the PlayStation 3 controller, and there's even 2 DualShock controllers there too. Unless one of them's, the 6-axis controller we talked about earlier. I don't know. Nonetheless, it's here. If you pay close attention to random other little details around the game, there's some interesting things like Uncharted 13, a lush movie, and this headline of Justin Bieber as Drake. And no, it's not Drake, the musician, if you can call him that. It's probably a play on Nathan Drake, but Justin Bieber is playing Nathan Drake. Man, I don't know. I feel like it'd be a weird decision to cast a non-American young actor to play a character like Nathan Drake for a film adaptation, but I guess Justin Bieber made sense. Also, if you pay attention to this one specific house that Bill, Joel, and Ellie are traveling through, it looks awfully familiar. Maybe like the house at the beginning of the Walking Dead Telltale game, which also was a really big game back around this time. Also over here, is Ellie whistling the theme of Uncharted, like Nate's theme? Here's the official Uncharted theme, and this is what Ellie whistles.
Oh, good. Something else you can drive me crazy with.
That's awesome.
I mean, you might have noticed there's a couple of Uncharted references we've run into already, and Uncharted is another game made by Naughty Dog. And honestly, Naughty Dog kind of knocking it out of the park with first-party games on this era. It was almost like they were carrying Sony here, keeping them, on top. Naughty Dog hid a couple of references also just to names of characters that have existed in their other games. Like, for instance, in the basement of the Hotel Grand, Joel has to find a key card, and the owner of the key card's name is Jack Sullivinsky, which could be a reference to the character Sullivan from the Uncharted series. I wonder if the Jack Jack thing, while it's spelled differently, is a reference to Jack and Daxter also maybe. There is a poster that has some interesting information about employee rights, and it says that the poster was made by the Jack Company, which, this time it is spelled like Jack and Daxter, which of course is another Naughty Dog franchise. Also, this fake phone number is TLOU, which is just the initials for The Last of Us, and the URL is for The Last of Us's website, I guess. Over at the Serenity Apartments, if you look around, you can actually find these Jack and Daxter plush toys that can be found on a dresser. There's also a Nathan Drake plush toy. Then when they remade this game on the PlayStation 4, they did add a Nathan Drake toy as well, but it wasn't in the original PS3 version. Also in the Serenity Apartments, there's this bedroom that has a bunch of posters all over the place, and they're kind of parody references to real films that exist. Like Hair Trigger is likely a parody of the action thriller film from 2002, The Transporter. A classic Jason Statham movie. Also, did you guys know there was 4 Transporter movies? When did that happen? The 4th one was a reboot with a different actor, and the movie made its money back, and it was profitable, but it didn't review very well. Jason Statham wasn't in that, so I don't know. There's also this poster for the Season of Vengeance, which is a reference to the 2003 film The Last Samurai. Never realized that movie actually came out in 2003. For some reason, I thought the movie came out like less than 10 years ago. And then this poster is for The Lost Kingdom, which likely is a reference to Indiana Jones. Also, throughout the game, you can find a blue mouse pad, and there's a few spots where this is, and it has the Naughty Dog logo on it, so that's kind of cool. If you go to the Castro Cycles bike store, there's actually this yellow poster outside that shows a green bike, and it says, "I want to ride my bicycle," which is a reference to the 1978 Queen song, Bicycle Race. Also, it seems like in this universe, Uncharted and Jack and Daxter might actually be board games, which is kind of interesting. In the toy store, Joel can find a few board games that have the names Uncharted and Jack and Daxter on them. Then there's this pub called O'Sullivan's Irish Pub, and this is very, very clever because this is pretty much the same pub from the opening sequence in Uncharted 3, Drake's Deception, and then the name O'Sullivan's, once again, a reference to the character Sullivan. But that's not where this little stuff ends here, because just outside of the pub itself, there's a little coffee cart, and the coffee cart is called Java Jack, which is another clever reference here. During the chapter Fun and Games of the Left Behind DLC, standalone expansion, whatever you want to call it, you can find another Java Jack coffee cart as well. Also, the existence of the arcade itself, called Raja's Arcade, is a reference to the characters Eddie and Rika Raja from the Uncharted series. Also, I love this so much, but this here says, "Infected inside, do not open." This is a reference to both the television and comic book The Walking Dead, where early on when he's leaving the hospital, he sees the infamous "Don't Dead, Open Inside" sign. That never made any sense to me. Why would you write it like this? So I think it's cool to put a little clever nod to this. If you go to the Hidden Pines Coral Ranch House, there's a game here called The Game of Strife, which I guess is a play on the Game of Life, but, a little bit more hardcore, I guess. So this is interesting. There's a journalist's name featured on one of the newspaper clipping artifacts that's found during the university chapter with the name Lev Benioff. Now, interestingly enough, is that this is a reference to the novel City of Thieves written by David Benioff, and its protagonist's character is named Lev. Now, Naughty Dog went on reference saying that that book specifically served as some of the inspiration for what types of things they wanted to include in this game and its story. So it's cool to see it come full circle here. There's a couple other inspirations that were used for The Last of Us that they ended up putting little references to in the game themselves. Like one of the books that Ellie owns is called To Get to the Other Side, and that can be found in her backpack in the Lakeside Resort chapter. And the author of this book in the game is called Catherine McCormick, which is a reference to the real life author Cormac McCarty, who wrote the 2006 post-apocalyptic novel The Road, which was another inspiration here. Also, throughout the Suburbs chapter, Joel can find these notes that mention a character named Ish, and there's a community he's a part of. This is likely a reference to the character Isherwood Williams from the 1949 post-apocalyptic science fiction novel Earth Abides, which was written by George Stewart, and probably served as another inspiration for this connected universe. There's a pet store that's called Faithful Dog, which is a play on the name of the development studio being Naughty Dog. It's an opposite thing. Inside of the kitchen of Todd's Steakhouse, if you head to the back office, you can see this notice board, and there's a piece of paper that seems to display the Furba dagger, which was something featured in Uncharted 2 Among Thieves. Then during the chapter Bus Depot, there's this NDI sticker on the wall of a bathroom stall inside of this bus station, and that's a reference to Naughty Dog, as the stickers are identical from the ones found in Uncharted 3, Drake's Deception. If you go to the Firefly Lab at St. Mary's Hospital, there's this eye chart and it has some interesting messages on it. It looks like it's trying to say run, you are nearly there, don't quit, but I don't know, I had trouble reading this the first time around. Naughty Dog didn't finish with the Easter eggs here either. There's still more things that they ended up hiding. Like if you beat the game, there's character skins you could get for Ellie that reference the Jak and Daxter series, like this t-shirt that is probably a reference to Jak and Daxter, literally. I mean, you can also get this hoodie, a backpack, and Jak's goggles. There's also a Naughty Dog themed t-shirt, and there's other things that were hidden as well. Like for instance, if you play Left Behind, you can go to the Spooky Town Costume Emporium, and there's this packaged Nathan Drake costume, which is kind of funny. There's also a Jak X costume. You remember how we talked about that arcade a little bit earlier? Interestingly enough, there is a Jak X combat racing arcade game inside of the arcade itself. So it's like a reference within a reference. Also, that Raja's arcade does end up showing up once again later on in the special like visual novel, The Last of Us American Dreams. Now, while this is the most of the main Easter eggs that showed up in The Last of Us 1, there are some other interesting things worth noting. Like for instance, when this game got remade, they did add a lot of new Easter eggs as well. Like the Office from the television show The Office would show up and a lot of cool little things. But other games have made cool references back to The Last of Us as well that are just kind of worth mentioning since we're talking about The Last of Us here. Like for instance, even though we will talk about Uncharted in a little bit, Uncharted 3 Drake's Deception has this deadly fungus newspaper where it talks about like scientists trying to understand what's causing this deadly fungus to work the way that it does, which kind of ties into the whole connected universe theory. Matter of fact, this little Easter egg reference to The Last of Us was kind of a mess up because Naughty Dog added the Easter egg thinking that by the time people played Uncharted 3 that they would have already announced The Last of Us, but that didn't end up happening. So they almost kind of gave away The Last of Us before The Last of Us was specifically announced and showcased and the story was out there. Also, the name of the group that's called the Marauders is kind of interesting here because it could possibly be a reference to the Marauders that were found in Jak 3. Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. What do you guys think? 2015's Dying Light has a reference to The Last of Us where there's a clicker weapon upgrade. There's a zombie in this like bloody elevator shaft and it looks similar to a clicker. So that makes sense there. Then if you kill the zombie, it ends up dropping a weapon upgrade called clicker. So double meaning here. Man, Dying Light in its own right had a lot of cool Easter eggs too. So maybe down the road we'll talk about future generation games as well. But for now, it's cool to see a callback to The Last of Us in another game. In Firewatch, there's like a secret sweater that is a reference to the University of Eastern Colorado, which is of course the university that Joel and Ellie travel to. In Firewatch, they even like debate whether or not the university even exists, which is kind of funny.
There's a University of Eastern Colorado?
I really don't think there is.
Why would somebody make that up?
Right, and then put it on a sweatshirt.
The world's a weird place.
Also in Uncharted 4, A Thief's End, there's this pirate that, you know, didn't seem to make it, but it seems like he has coral growing out of his head, kind of like what a clicker would maybe look like. Also in Uncharted The Lost Legacy, there's this small alcove where you can find a strange skull, and the treasure is likely a reference to the fortune-telling Skeleseer that Ellie and Riley find in the Halloween store during The Last of Us Left Behind. And more recently, in Life is Strange 2, there's this like creepy mushroom thing where they make this joke here that the mushroom kind of looks like a clicker.
Looks like a clicker. Creepy.
Yeah.
Stop it.
Also, before we fully move on from The Last of Us part of this video, huge thank you to The Last of Us wiki fandom because they've done a great job at documenting Easter eggs so that people like me can come around and, you know, not miss out on some of the very obscure details that not everyone sees. Gran Turismo 5 would actually end up being the highest selling first-party game on the PlayStation 3. And while racing games aren't always my favorite, I did find some of the little secrets and Easter eggs in this game to be incredibly interesting. Like for instance, something that started out as a straight up blunder ended up getting turned into an Easter egg. Now, as far as I'm aware, there's a pretty large community around the scale model car collecting hobby. And Auto Art has been very popular for their precision scale models and making vehicle models that are like 1/18th the size of a real vehicle. They have a good reputation for being really precise when modeling cars after the real world equivalents. And I guess the development studio studio Polyphony Digital wanted to replicate that accuracy in their own game, literally. After Gran Turismo 5 came out in 2010, players began to notice that if they flipped certain vehicles, specifically the Nissan R34, if you looked closely, you could see the Auto Art logo here, and even where the screws would be, like the Phillips head screws that would normally be in the model vehicle itself. It literally even says 1/18th Nissan Skyline on it. Like, they messed up here. They kind of rushed through this one. After a few people started posting about their findings on various forums online, the development team would go ahead and update the game and fix this, and then they would go in and add another little message in the same spot, this time saying, "Thanks for finding this." Kind of a little cool nod to, play off the weirdness of this whole thing. Also, thanks to Oscari14 for posting about this on some PlayStation Trophy website in 2011. He found some other interesting Easter eggs, like a secret monkey that is on the Trial Mountain circuit. So look at that, it's a monkey. Apparently this whole monkey being hidden is like a recurring thing that pops up from time to time in the Gran Turismo series, so pay attention to that next time you play that game. Also, on the same level, if you look off into the distance in the water, you can... What is that? It looks like there's a guy standing on a log out in the water randomly. Who is he? Why is he here? Also, the Loch Ness Monster over here. Yeah, they hid the Loch Ness Monster in the water. Another thing that apparently is recurring in the Gran Turismo games. I don't know. I love random little Easter eggs hidden in games like this, especially in like unsuspecting games like Gran Turismo 5. I'm all for it. There's a couple of other interesting things that are hidden in Gran Turismo 5. Like, for instance, if you look at Burn, this marketplace here, you can find a dog that was in Gran Turismo 4, apparently. Now, typically in the background of the Gran Turismo 5 game, all of the people in the audience are typically men. However, there is a single woman in the game who's also in Burn at the marketplace. Who is she? Then also, it seems like the Gran Turismo logo itself has been hidden in this game over in the lights, which is kind of cool. Like, you can kind of see it here. And would it be a real PlayStation 3 Easter egg video if there wasn't a PlayStation 3 itself hidden in another game? Well, there is a PS3 in the backseat of the SEMA at the Gran Turismo Awards G37. I have no idea what that means. I did also find various discussions in forums talking about a flying pig Easter egg in Gran Turismo 5, though I couldn't find anything of it when I tried to research it on my own. So I don't know if it actually works. The links to screenshots of it were mostly dead, so I don't know what's going on here. All I could find on YouTube were flying Bugattis or something. So if you ever saw a flying pig, do let us know in the comments, because I'd be curious to see what this could look like. I can only imagine. Also, interestingly enough, in Gran Turismo 5, if you look closely at the posters out of bounds, you can see an advertisement for Yakuza 3, which was a PlayStation 3 exclusive at the time. Now, it turns out this cracks open a whole deeper rabbit hole when it comes to the Gran Turismo series, as Gran Turismo 5 has a lot going on, but also Gran Turismo 6, which we'll get to in a bit, that also released on the PS3. But fortunately, there is a member in the community who's discovered a lot of these and has done a great job archiving so many Easter eggs and little references and little hidden things that are found in these games that people never talk about. So huge thank you to the user Too Fast For You for sharing this stuff online. I never realized how terrifying some of the characters in Gran Turismo looked out of bounds, like if you zoomed in with the camera, because normally you're just driving your car, you're not looking at what's going on out of bounds, but oh my god, look at this child. He is like something from nightmares. This guy posted a huge dump though of so many images of things you normally wouldn't see, like this cat, some of the other Easter eggs that we talked about already, but there's some interesting things that he found too that I never would have noticed. Like, what's going on in this image? Are these like tree creatures or something? Like, are those faces in the grass or trees, or am I just imagining it? What's going on with these guys? Why are they levitating? Are they what? Some people feel like there's a face or something in this texture here. I can kind of see it. I think it was intentional, but what is the story here? This one that kind of looks like a grunt from the Halo series carved into a cliff here apparently also shows up in the same track in both Gran Turismo 4 and Gran Turismo 6. So like, this is an old Easter egg that's been brought up a few times. Now, Astrobot's probably the newest game we're going to talk about in this video, and while obviously it doesn't come from the PlayStation 3 era, the fact that this game serves as like a massive homage to all things throughout PlayStation's history, there's a lot of references to titles that were very prominent and popular during the PlayStation 3 era. So we wanted to at least talk about everything that makes a cool reference to the PS3 games that were so big back in the day. Many of the games that are referenced in Astrobot will also have their own features in this video as well. Like for instance, in Astrobot, there's over 173 PlayStation-based characters, kind of as these like little Easter eggs, and these are just really cool to take a look at. Like for instance, Uncharted, which started off in 2007 with Drake's Fortune, would be a huge deal for the success of the PlayStation 3. It would have Uncharted 2, Among Thieves, Uncharted 3, Drake's Deception, and I mean, there were also some spin-offs that weren't on the PlayStation 3, but I mean, this was a big deal. So in Astrobot, there's a lot of representation from the Uncharted series. We got the Nathan Drake bot, we have Chloe Fraser, who was introduced in Uncharted 2 Among Thieves, we got Sully from the main trilogy, Elena Fisher, who first showed up in Drake's Fortune, shows up here as well as a bot. They even got Sir Francis Drake. At the end of the Xbox 360 PlayStation 3 era, Metal Gear Revengeance released. It was developed by Platinum Games and published by Konami, and Astrobot references this as well. We have a special Raiden bot here. Then The Last of Us being some of the most popular games for the PlayStation 3 era, we do see a Joel, Ellie, and Clicker bot all from The Last of Us. We get a Fetch bot and a Delson bot from Infamous Second Son, and Cole from the original Infamous as a bot. There's a bot from the Sackboy series, another game we'll talk about a bit more in this video, as Sackboy was pretty integral for the PlayStation 3 back in the day. There's the robed figure from that Journey game from 2012 on the PS3. Then Resident Evil has some representation as well, with Leon Kennedy, who of course originally was introduced in older games, but did play a big role during the PS3 era, showing up in both Resident Evil Operation Raccoon City and Resident Evil 6, so he is a bot here. Claire Redfield also was in Resident Evil Operation Raccoon City. Chris Redfield showed up quite a bit during the PlayStation 3 era, showing up in Resident Evil The Umbrella Chronicles, Resident Evil 5, Resident Evil The Dark Side Chronicles, Resident Evil Revelations, which eventually did come to the PS3, and Resident Evil 6. I guess technically Leon and Claire did show up in Resident Evil Dark Side Chronicles also. I just kind of forget that that game came to the PS3. And then there is a bot for Jill Valentine as well, who showed up a bunch during the PS3 era as well, including The Umbrella Chronicles, but she was in Resident Evil 5, Revelations, and Operation Raccoon City. There are a couple of interesting references to Demon Souls, which kind of kicked off the whole Souls genre, and we do have like the Adventurer and this Maiden in Black here represented as well. It is easy to forget that Persona 5 did technically release on the PS3 at launch, so we do have Joker. There are other Persona characters in this as well, but they technically didn't have prominence on the PS3, so we can't talk about them, but Joker was there. Jodie Holmes has representation as a bot who is from the Beyond Two Souls game. That game came out right at the end of the PlayStation 3's life, and a little bit more obscure, but there is the Pomeranian from the more obscure game Tokyo Jungle, which also shows up here. Pretty cool stuff, Sony. Now, if we want to get a little more technical when it comes to Astrobot, besides just like the cameo bot appearances, there are specific Easter eggs. Like for instance, there is an entire like Nathan Drake Uncharted inspired level where you can even interact with Nathan Drake briefly. And while there are probably more references we missed here from Astrobot, there are a lot of other references from the PS3 era that Astro's been involved in, like the previous Astrobot game, which instead back in the day was called Astro's Playroom, which was preloaded on a lot of PlayStation 5 devices, had some pretty cool homages to the PlayStation 3 era. For instance, if you went over to Cooling Springs, you could actually find a PS3 game disc. There's a literal PS3 over here. And if you go over to Bolt Beach, you can find the DualShock 3 and the PS3 iToy camera, which is wild to think about. I forgot that that existed for a second. I don't know. I always thought it was cool how Cooling Spring just in itself is a big dedication to the existence of the PlayStation 3. Actually, in that game, if you make it to the post-game section of the game, there's even more unlockables that are just various artifacts from over the years of PlayStation. Random peripherals are pretty cool, but there is a PlayStation 3 Slim and a PlayStation 3 Super Slim found here as well. Of course, Astro's Playroom did a great job including a lot of other PlayStation 3 references to various games that were really big back in the day. Obviously, Nathan Drake shows up, and there's other games as well. Kratos shows up. We haven't talked too much about the Kratos references because Kratos existed before the PS3 and also was kind of rebooted in the PS4, PS5 era, so a lot of references are usually to that newer era, but every once in a while there's a callback to one of the God of War games back during the PS3 era too, and that's pretty cool for fans of the PS3 era. Also in the first area of Gutsy Gateway, there is a trail of flower petals flying around, and if you look closely and listen to the tone, it's actually a reference to the 2009 Flower game on the PS3. Astro's Playroom even had a reference to Heavy Rain, which was a big deal in the PS3 era too. But there is a little callback to Infamous here, where you can kind of slide on this little shock thing. There even was a small reference to Resistance Fall of Man, where you see this like skeleton skull here. He didn't do so hot, did he? This is a reference to the game's cover, which, looked similar, I guess. But yeah, what a crazy thing to think about. The launch title for the PS3. Over in the background of this like space area, you can actually see a little bot that has a zipper and he's on this like round thing. It almost looks very similar to 2008's Little Big Planet. See the comparison here? I see it. There's a few other little more obscure references that come from the PS3 era, like there's a reference to 2009's Fat Princess for the PS3, where you can see this really bloated looking bot that has a slice of cake on him. There's a section of the game where you have to walk on this rolling hexagon thing, and there'll be this bot that has a pair of golden scissors, and that's a reference to the 2013 PS3 game known as Puppeteer. There's also another little subtle and clever reference to The Last of Us found in Astro's Playroom as well. And also, while we're talking about just other games referenced in this game, it is interesting how some of the platforms, especially in the Uncharted things, are kind of labeled with these like yellow markers, similar to how in the actual game, sometimes that's the case. In Astro's Playroom as well, there's another reference to Demon Souls with the Adventurer and the Maiden in Black showing up here as well. On Mount Motherboard, there is a reference to that Journey game again. In the PlayStation Labo section, there's some references to some PS3 games, like, once again, Beyond Two Souls. And then this one's kind of interesting, but one of the unlockable displays that you can get in this little, like, gacha game thing is the Honey, I'm Home trophy, which is a reference to the SCE London Studios PlayStation Home, which was this interesting social hub type game experience that launched all the way back in 2008 during the PS3 era and then closed in 2015. But you were able to explore different themed places, and you had like a virtual house. Also, some of the game's trophies, which were like PlayStation achievements, reference taglines from like different types of marketing things they would do for the PlayStation 3. Like, it only does everything and welcome to the third place. There were some other interesting displays that you could unlock as well. Like, there is this one where one of the bots is holding a boomerang type controller, which was actually a prototype controller for the original PlayStation 3. Do you remember that interesting reveal all the way back in the day? Man, they really did a great job with both of these games and just having a ton of really, really cool callbacks.
Metal Gear Solid 4 Guns of the Patriots was highly acclaimed when it released on the PlayStation 3 in 2008. Critics and fans praised it for its cinematic storytelling, innovative gameplay mechanic, and its ability to tie together the sprawling narrative threads of the Metal Gear franchise up until then. Upon release, it had near-perfect scores from all major outlets, and it was a technical showcase for the PlayStation 3 in its early years. It also served as the conclusion to Solid Snake's storyline and tied together the many narrative threads that were open from previous games. The game resolved major questions about the Patriots, and there was closure for characters like Snake, Big Boss, Raiden, and Otacon. On top of that, there was also a lot of secrets you can unlock, like weapons, items, or even outfits. One of these outfits is straight up the Assassin's Creed outfit that Altair wears, and it's actually kinda hilarious wearing it in cutscenes. Also, this game just has an iPod as an item in the game that you can listen to music on. If you want a little bit of a challenge and you defeat 5 bosses non-lethally, you can collect these 5 dolls, and then you will unlock a special flare gun that shoots a bolt of lightning. There's 49 ghost faces hidden in the game that you can see through use of the in-game camera item. Some are characters from previous Metal Gear games, and some are the faces of developers. During one of the missions, you can find this cornfield, and some War of the Worlds style dialogue will happen.
Something happened to me last Thursday when I was driving home. I had a couple of miles to go. I looked up and saw a glowing orange object in the sky to the east. It was moving very irregularly. Suddenly, there was intense light all around me. When I came to, I was home.
When you're in Eastern Europe, every now and then you can see this mysterious man in a trench coat peeking around the corner, watching your every move. If you zoom in with the camera, you can see him a little better, but if you walk towards him, he will disappear, and even when you turn the corner, he will be nowhere to be found. Kinda creepy actually, and something that I feel like would have also happened in PT Silent Hills if that game ever released. rest in peace.
Yo, Infamous was kind of a big deal also during the PlayStation 3 era, being a game developed by Sucker Punch Productions. It was a pretty big exclusive PS3 game. You play as some biker turned superhuman, because why not? There are a few cool Easter eggs, though, sprinkled across the Infamous games that reference other PlayStation titles, which is interesting in itself. Like, for instance, you head over to the Neon District. There's like this big cinema with listings for viewings for something called Sly Cooper 4 and Honor Among Thieves. You know, I wonder if that ties into the Sly Cooper series. At this point, when the game came out, Sly Cooper 4 wasn't announced yet. So this was even bigger of a deal because this is essentially like the little secret announcement. That's not where the, Sly Cooper references stop in Infamous. For instance, Cole's backpack has the Sly Cooper emblem patch on it, something that would carry over in both Infamous 1 and Infamous 2. There's even a trophy called You're So Sly. Get it? Because Sly Cooper is a character that exists. So these were kind of clever, right? Well, Infamous 2 takes these little references and dials it up to 11 as they just were like, hey, let's just have some fun with it. Once again, involving movie theaters, this time maybe a little seedier movie theaters. There are several movies listed here that are references to other video games. And it's funny because, like, obviously they're trying to do like this parody thing. And in a place like this, I'm sure movie parodies are common to have names based off of like real things. So it's a parody of parodies, but in this case, it's just funny. So let's see what we have here. Let's see what type of interesting movies you can watch, for educational purposes. All right, so we have Call of Booty, which is likely a parody of the Call of Duty series. Solid Serpent, a playoff of Metal Gear Solid. Uncharted Love. That one's pretty obvious from Uncharted. Halo Reach. I love this one. This is a pretty interesting spelling, and I think that's a clever play right there. Assassins Need Love 2. No Need for Speed. Epic Hickey. Oh my god, how do they not get sued by Disney? We got Little Big Unit over here, and Ratchet and Skank. Oh my god. As a play of like Ratchet and Clank. And then just Sly. Nothing crazy for that one. Just a reference to their own game, Sly Cooper. They're not going to make fun of themselves, right? There was DLC for this game too that would put Sly's cane as a replacement skin for the amp as well, which is just cool to see more crossovers between these very different games. Also, if you have an eagle-eyed view, you might notice that at the beginning of the mission Torn, Zeke is reading a book, and this book is Thievius Raccoonus. Like the big heirloom thing that's integral to the Sly Cooper story. There's also a side mission called Assassin's Greed. There's an advertisement for a secret club known as the Over 9000 Clubs that's open all night, which is a reference to Dragon Ball Z. There's something going on with these hotline numbers. 555-1337. LEET. The whole LEET speak thing that was used heavily in the late 2000s, early 2010s. We got a store named Boys Are Toys, a reference to Toys R Us, but in a really weird way. There's a reference to The Shining, where we have like this red rum being a thing, and red rum backwards is murder, and that's like, The Shining. Then, in one of the biggest stabs at Xbox, they actually have a shop called Red Ring Electronics, which is just a straight up diss to the Xbox 360 that was having the whole Red Ring of Death issue, and they kind of had some fun with this one, so good on them. But look, you can get all your system repairs in just 12 weeks, so it can't be that bad, right? Also, you might have noticed there's a lot of Subway sandwich locations. This is because of a partnership that PlayStation had during this time, so yeah, Subway is here. It's a really good thing that they didn't put Jared in as a playable character or something. Imagine how bad that would have been. Jesus Christ. There was DLC for Infamous as well. There was Infamous Festival of Blood, and there was movie parody names here as well for other video games. Let's look at these ones. We got ScarCraft 2, Assassin's Bleed, clever, LA Gore, Red Dead Vampires, Die Cooper 4 Vampire Thieves, a little funnier, Unstaked Vampires Deception. You know what? I just realized this far into reading these that this is supposed to be like vampire themes associated with it. What else do we got? Mass Infect 3, ew, Modern Gorefare, and Deadface. Great.
Also, while getting some footage for this on the PlayStation streaming service, I found some more Easter eggs that are kind of interesting. But first I want to say, why can't I clip stuff from the PlayStation streaming games? Why is it restricted? I had to go and film my television like it's back in the day. Nonetheless, I found this cabaret that was called Yes We Can, and this game released during Obama's second campaign, so I guess is pretty clever. Also, I found 1337 again on this poster for this noir show. Also, I found this picture in the store, and it says Rusty's Plumbing and Rusty McClellan. Well, this is a hard name to pronounce. Sorry for butchering it, but I found this picture and I wonder if it's him.
Now, the Killzone series was a really big deal for PlayStation, especially during the PlayStation 3 era where, they were trying to be like, hey, we have cool shooters too. We don't need to have Halo or Gears of War. We have Killzone. And interestingly enough, to my surprise when doing research for this video, it doesn't seem like a lot of the Killzone games that were on the PS3 had a whole lot of Easter eggs. Now, it could have been because development for these games were maybe a little bit tighter and they didn't have time to implement little jokes and whatnot, or maybe there was a rule against having a lot of Easter eggs in them, so we don't see too many references to the series. However, we do finally get something a little wholesome, because Killzone is often a forgotten about series. In Horizon Zero Dawn, there is an ancient vessel known as the Ancient Vessel KZ, which does have an image on it that pretty much is identical, or at least partially identical, to the European box art of Killzone 3, which was, of course, the game series that Guerrilla Games worked on before moving on to Horizon Zero Dawn. So at least there's a little callback to a PS3 era Killzone game, even if it's just this. It does seem like there's a group of guards over at Dawn's Sentinel that are playing a board game also in Horizon Zero Dawn that does kind of look like, one of the Helghast soldiers from Killzone. It's not much, but at least it's acknowledgement that the Killzone series existed. In Horizon Forbidden West, they did do a little thing with Killzone. There's some weapons that are heavily resembling weapons from the Killzone series, but it seems like the main one people point to is actually from Killzone Shadowfall, which already fell into the PlayStation 4 era.
I always thought Resistance was a cool franchise back in the day, at least in the PS3 era, and I mean, it did kind of stay in the PS3 era, besides 2 handheld spin-offs, but, we never saw a Resistance on PlayStation 4 or PlayStation 5. But looking at this kind of makes me miss the times where PlayStation was really trying to get their own Halo going. Nonetheless, this game had some Easter eggs, and there was actually some Easter eggs that were included in all 3 PlayStation 3 games, so they're like overarching. For example, there's these gnomes that show up throughout all the Resistance games, and they are hidden in various many places. It's kind of like a running gag, I guess, that these gnomes showed up all the time, and I don't know, it just seems like weird. Also reminds me of that one YouTuber that has like a friend called Alex or something. Also, teddy bears are often used as Easter eggs hidden in video games, and we'll talk about one franchise that did that a little bit later, but the Resistance games also had multiple hidden teddy bears across multiple levels, and some of them you actually have to go out of bounds to even find. Also, these really creepy Jack-in-the-Box things can be found in multiple Resistance games, including Resistance 2 and 3. In Resistance 2, you can find this robot on this shelf here, and honestly, it kind of looks like Clank from Ratchet and Clank, but I don't know, maybe it's just like people used to think it was Clank from Ratchet and Clank, but maybe it's not. Obviously, Resistance 2 had a multiplayer mode as well, and there's some Easter eggs hidden in there as well. Like on the map Garfield Park, when you walk out on this destroyed bridge on these like steel beams, and then you turn around, you can actually find an actual Easter egg, like fully painted. Also spread across the campaign and multiplayer, I think, there's also these Maui statues hidden all over the place, and you can find them in very many spots, and sometimes there's like multiple in a single campaign level or map. Now, Resistance 3 actually got this April Fool's Easter egg patched in for April Fool's Day, and if you were playing Resistance 3 on this day and you were going through a specific mission, and it's like this Unreal section and enemies are throwing stuff at you from this motel balcony or whatever, they will actually be throwing gnomes, which obviously is a callback again to the gnome thing they had in multiple games. Also, I was looking at this on an IGN upload from like 12 years ago, and in the comments there's like the remnants of them arguing with someone, but like I can't see who they're arguing with because they didn't have like the comment and sub-comment structure back then, so it's just like a bunch of random comments by IGN. Also, in the ending cutscene of the game, when you see the kid play with the toy, that specific thing is actually the Hydra tank from Ratchet and Clank. Also, apparently there is another April Fool's Easter egg, and this time you can find this snowman once a year. And also on April Fool's Day, there is this mysterious man that shows up in this window. Now, we haven't had a new Resistance game in like 2 generations, and we probably won't get one anytime soon, but it's not fully forgotten. Sometimes a PlayStation game will reference it, like Ratchet and Clank in 2016.
Look at this. They have my blaster runs hot. Bongoid with a stick. Oh, Spiro the Space Moose. They even have the Mega Limited Ultra Edition of Intransigence Fall of Blarg.
That one comes with exclusive content if you pre-order through Gadgetron.
And then obviously Elijah already mentioned the Astro's Playroom Easter egg for Resistance as well.
Okay, then we have the Uncharted series, which essentially was another behemoth game series that was straight out of the PlayStation 3 era and was a definitive game for the PlayStation 3. Now, the first game, Uncharted Drake's Fortune, had a couple of interesting things, like there were these secret relics that you could find, and they're literal Easter eggs, which is kind of funny. These are interesting little thing because essentially they're the precursor orbs in the Jak and Daxter series, which was also made by Naughty Dog, and it has like these markings on them which people have been able to translate, and the translation roughly reads to Naughty Dog on the top row here, and the bottom row it says Madman. Towards the beginning of the game, when you're seeing the cutscene with Nate and Elena and they're wearing the wetsuits, there's the word Otzel printed on them, which is a nod to Jak and Daxter, as well as Daxter is an Otzel. Also, if you look at this seaplane here, you'll see the Hog Wild logo here. This one's actually really interesting because, as many of you know, Naughty Dog doesn't have the rights to Crash Bandicoot anymore, despite the fact that they had created Crash Bandicoot and it was successful because of them, but the rights were sold off to the publisher. So a lot of the times in Naughty Dog games, they don't really make references to Crash Bandicoot, but in this case, they did with this Hog Wild plane, which is a reference to the infamous Hog Wild level in Crash Bandicoot. Also, if you look at the back harness that Nate's wearing, you'll see NDI, which stands for Naughty Dog Inc. Also, some people have wondered if Nathan Drake, the character here, has the first two letters of his name, like his initials, are ND, as in Naughty Dog. Also, in the whole plane crash sequence, ND shows up again as the brand for the parachute, probably referencing Naughty Dog yet again. Uncharted 2 has some interesting things as well. For a game called Among Thieves, they definitely didn't thieve out on Easter eggs. That was a dumb joke. I'm sorry. During this cutscene where they're all drinking the alcohol together, you can see some Greek writing on the blackboard in the background that actually translates roughly to persistent God Nathan or much enduring divine Nathan. Also, zoom and enhance here. What's going on is that Harry Flynn's shirt saying NDI again, another reference to Naughty Dog Inc. And then in the Uncharted universe, is NDI some mega corporation that owns literally every single thing? Also, some of the boxes that are around the game, like the little crates, will have a red paw print on them, which is of course similar to the Naughty Dog logo. Also, Uncharted 2 is pretty interesting because there was a special skin for Drake called the Donut Drake costume that made him look like this, which led to a lot of interesting moments when you're playing through the game. And while a lot of the cutscenes he kind of goes back, there is one line of dialogue directly referencing what he's wearing.
You put on weight, mate.
Or I guess not what he's wearing, but what he looks like in this state. Also in Uncharted 2, there's a little callback to the first Uncharted game by having this hotel named the El Dorado Hotel, because they'll have a whole El Dorado thing plays into the first game. Also, just like the first game, there is another strange relic that can be found in this sewer area, and once again, it's just like the one before, a literal Easter egg hiding here. And then over here, we have a sign for some sort of cool looking club known as Club Raja. I wonder what's going on here. Could be neat. Also, a little spoiler alert if you haven't played much of Uncharted 2, but there's this whole part where Harry turns out to not be the nicest person in the world, and if you decide to swing on him, you'll get a little cutscene that plays where he hits you in the head, and then you fall over, and then he kind of warns you. This wouldn't play out if you don't swing on him, and then if you try to swing on him a second time, he'll do the same exact thing, except shoot you, and you die. That's it. This now brings us to Uncharted 3, and this game was a really big deal, and I think Sony knew it. They were going all out marketing the game. They straight up did a promotion with Subway sandwiches for the game. I mean, look at this. Yeah, what a crazy time to be alive. And there are quite a bit of things in Uncharted 3. Just like the previous two games, there is the strange relic where you can find this Easter egg. This time it's in Chapter 4. If you climb this pipe directly to this platform, you can grab the egg here. There's this one part where there's a pool and it's raining heavily. And if you run around the pool area, even though there's no water in it, and you kind of swing around a bit, he'll yell out Marco, like he's playing Marco Polo but by himself. Kind of funny, kind of random, but hey, why not? There's speculation that in Chapter 12, Ramsey's ship that's called the C word, get it? It sounds like it's trying to censor a word that you shouldn't say, or at least a demonetizable word. It's like a little double joke here, but it also might be a reference to Arrested Development, where the character Gob has the boat by the same name, and it's like the C word joke. Also, if you paid close attention during Chapter 9, you'll see that everyone's kind of on this little bus ride ride. Who doesn't like buses? While they're having a conversation, in the background, if you zoom in and enhance, you can see a Sackboy doll, which is a nice little reference to Little Big Planet, just hanging out here in the front window. Also, this bus has a CRT television. I'm very impressed. Also, towards the beginning of Chapter 9, I guess this is where this happens, when they're all going through this like narrow passageway, Sully mentions that he wants to go last, and Charlie makes a reference that next they'll be standing behind him with a gun telling him about the rabbits. This is a reference to John Steinbeck's Of Mice and Men. You guys remember Lenny? Bam! If you don't fully get the reference, The Walking Dead pretty much lifted the plot of that directly in the 4th season. So they did that whole thing with Carol. Remember that? Bam! Cool. There's other literature references as well in this game. Like during the desert sequence when Drake's lost, Rosalind can be heard reading a passage from T.S. Eliot's poem, The Wasteland. One of the lines from the poem is, "Only there is shadow under this red rock," and Drake makes his way under a red rock. So yeah, those are some of the main ones from Uncharted 3. Kind of cool. Yo, I think the Little Big Planet series might have actually contributed way more to the PlayStation 3 than what a lot of people even think about on a regular basis, especially in the early years of this being a game series, as PlayStation 3 didn't have a whole lot going on in the first couple of years, nothing amazing, but then Little Big Planet existed, so there was something, right? This would then like branch out and become a kind of a staple for a little while at least. I'm surprised Sony doesn't utilize this IP a bit more than the occasional thing nowadays, but yeah, it was kind of a cool idea and something a little bit different, and it definitely fits in with that late 2000s vibe that the PS3 is known for. Of course, with the existence of the Little Big Planet series and the legacy it created, the inspiration that it would lead to in multiple different industries, nonetheless, there are some Easter eggs in this series. Now, to be fair, the first game didn't have as much going on when it came to like Easter eggs as the other games in the series would end up having, but there still was like a couple of interesting things with the first title. A lot of people didn't know about this, but there was a tetherless jetpack tutorial level where you can like test out the little jetpack or whatever, but you're just supposed to kind of get a feel for how to fly around. But if you flew all the way to the top, which took quite a few seconds, eventually like the little tutorial thing would pop up, character or whatever, and like be like, yeah, you can fly all the way up here. I don't know, not enough people actually flew all the way up here just to see this or find out what would happen if it happened, but yeah, if you did it, there was an Easter egg for it, as simple as it may seem. On the flip side of things, Little Big Planet 2 does have a cool callback to the first Little Big Planet game, where if you're playing on Patience Are a Virtue, you can find 3 original characters from the first game: the King, Frida, and Kid in Car. They're all here at the end of the level. Also, if you go to the arcade section in this game and you locate the machine that Sackbot is repairing, if you hop onto the machine and enter the Konami code here, it'll explode, revealing some numbers here. 37335683. Now, if you entered this on a phone's keypad, like back in the late 2000s when you would text this way and you had to, like use the whole T9 thing, some people are not going to know what I'm talking about. Nonetheless, if you're old enough to know what that is, it would type a message, and the message would be free love. So another interesting thing that's common for like Little Big Planet 2 is the whole collection of secret pins. And the pins would be kind of something you would have to go and like achieve in the game, and some, completionists go to try to get them all. However, there were special seasonal secret pins that you could get, but it wasn't like as straightforward and a little bit more involved. And what's interesting about this is that they wouldn't count towards your total pin count. So these were just extra bonus unrelated pins to the main one, but were a little bit more interesting. Like for instance, there was a festive spirit pin that you would essentially only be able to unlock if you wore a Christmas costume on Christmas Day. Similarly, there was Halloween haunting, where you had to put on a pumpkin head costume on Halloween. There was Thanksgiving turkey, where you had to put the turkey head costume on Thanksgiving specifically. There was a Valentine's one. But then there were some interesting ones that had a little extra going on. There was one for getting the platinum trophy for Little Big Planet 2. There were certain ones for birthday prezzies, but you had to play on someone's birthday, which were like 4 different specific dates, and there was different pins for each one. Group hug of 20,000 is when you have to get online at the same time as 20,000 other players, something I'm pretty sure you probably haven't been able to do in years, but maybe was something you could do for the first couple of years of this game being out. There was one called Picked, which is where you create a level that got featured in Picks, which was like a system of picking fan-made content. There was a pin for watching the credits to the end. There was a pin for running a fan website of Little Big Planet Planet 2, and there was also one for making a cool video on YouTube related to Little Big Planet 2. Hey, can we get the pin since we're talking about Little Big Planet 2 here? I mean, they don't have a deadline, right? I don't know, that's something kind of interesting, right?
Heavy Rain was another PS3 era classic, and while I couldn't find any Easter eggs for the main Heavy Rain game, I could find some callbacks that future PlayStation games would make to Heavy Rain, like Beyond Two Souls, where you can zoom in on this newspaper and it talks about the origami killer. And then in Beyond Two Souls, there is this movie theater and one of the movies playing is called Heavy Rain. Plus, you can also find the origami, like swans or whatever they are. I don't know, it's been a while since I played Heavy Rain. Are they swans? No, they're not swans. They look like the bird that talks after you. What are those called? Yo, I don't know birds and origami, I guess. But you can find them here. And also Beyond Two Souls had another couple Easter eggs. Like this door sign that says A113, which is like something that a lot of animators that went to the California Institute of Arts or something like experienced, and it's like an inside joke that appears in some Pixar and Disney movies, but it's also here. Also during the homeless or unhoused chapter, whatever you want to call it nowadays, you can interact with this guitar, and this will cause the main protagonist to perform the song Lost Cause by Beck.
Okay, we have to talk about PlayStation All-Stars Battle Royale. And of course, this is before Battle Royale had, the terminology it does now. This was a fighting game. This was Sony's own response to Super Smash Bros., except this is PlayStation characters. And this is such a cool idea. It was a really cool concept, execution, whatever. But as far as representation of the PlayStation IPs over the years and other interesting third-party stuff, this is incredible. It's a shame that we haven't seen more stuff, at least in the PlayStation All-Star lineup with the characters again. But yeah, this was a really big deal for Sony in 2012. Not only had people been speculating this game was going to exist, and there was rumors circulating for a while, but this game was more than just PlayStation 3. They actually released it as a PlayStation Vita game as well, and it would have a cross-purchase available or cross-buy feature, where if you buy the PlayStation 3 version, you get the PlayStation Vita version as well for no extra cost. But the big thing is that this was the definitive game that was a huge crossover event between various different games under the PlayStation umbrella. This whole game could arguably be an Easter egg because of, how much celebration there is of the PlayStation series, of all the PlayStation series here. But let's just look at the lineup that they had as the default cast of characters. Kratos from God of War, Parappa the Rapper. There was Fat Princess, Sweet Tooth from Twisted Metal, Colonel Radio from Killzone, Sly Cooper, Nathan Drake from Uncharted, Cole McGrath from Infamous. There's the evil version of Cole McGrath. There's Ratchet and Clank, Jack and Daxter, Big Daddy from Bioshock, which is like third-party representation, Dante from Devil May Cry, Hayachi Mishima from Tekken, Nariko from Heavenly Sword, Raiden from Metal Gear Solid, Sackboy from Little Big Planet, Sir Daniel from Medieval. I never played that game. And then we got Spike from Ape Escape and Toro Inyo from the Together Everywhere series. DLC characters would also come, where Kat and Dusty from Gravity Rush would be added, Emmett Graves from Starhawk, Zeus from God of War, and Isaac Clarke from Dead Space would be added in as well. Now, unlike the way that Super Smash Bros. Works, the stages of this game actually combine the aspects, ideas, concepts from multiple different game series together to form their own, unique crossover type world. Ever wonder what a crossover world between Killzone and Ape Escape would look like? Well, here's Invasion, or Stowaways is Uncharted and Bioshock themed. Bioshock Infinite and Twisted Metal together? What? This is where we can start to look at some of the little more secret or less known Easter eggs that show up in this game. Like, for instance, on the stage Metropolis, red orb chests from God of War have a chance of appearing after the Hydra invades the stage. But in this game, they drop all-star PowerPoints instead. On Dojo, if you pay close attention to the background after the walls of the dojo are taken out, you can see various scenarios and locations from other Parappa the Rapper games. Over on the San Francisco level, if you look at the moon in the background, you can see that it's the same moon that Insomniac Games use as their logo. On the level's time station, when Satan prepares to attack the center of the stage, the Resistance 3 logo appears as this warning sign. Now, a lot of the intros and outros also have special little nuanced homages to the games that they come from. Like, for instance, Radek has a losing outro where Radek holds a shotgun pistol while laying on his back in a last stand type position. This being a reference to the final boss in Killzone 2, where Radek takes him out with his pistol while being in last stand. Jack and Daxter's winning outro, called Life is Good, hood has Jack putting his blaster on his shoulders with Daxter hanging on the gun from one arm, which is similar to the artwork from Jak 2. The whole like recreating box art thing is kind of repeated throughout this game, and it's kind of cool actually. Like Ratchet has one where he turns around with the suck cannon. He's in the same pose as he is on the box art of the first Ratchet and Clank game. The Big Daddy from Bioshock has a little introduction that looks similar to the pose from the first Bioshock game's artwork. Dante has an intro that is reminiscent to the Devil May Cry 3 box art. Also, Raiden has an outro that looks like it's coming right from the Metal Gear Rising Japanese box art. And then there's a couple other interesting introductions and endings, like Parappa the Rapper having an introduction and ending that are drawn kind of in the same style as the Parappa the Rapper anime, which I didn't know was even a thing. And then of course this game has some costumes that are homages and references to other things as well. Like for instance, Kratos has a secondary color scheme option. So depending on what color character you have a couple of different options. Like Kratos' secondary color is for Ghost of Sparta. The Vat Princess has a couple of other little references. Like for instance, her fourth color turns her into Princess Muffin Top, which was the Blue Princess. One of Sly Cooper's color outfits, the fourth one for Master Thief, was actually a costume you could unlock in Sly Cooper Thieves in Time. Ratchet and Clank actually have some pretty cool skins, just various versions. They're based on default armor from Ratchet and Clank Future, A Crack in Time. There's a color scheme based on the commando suit from Ratchet and Clank Going Commando. Okay, there's also a couple of segments or sections in this game where the fourth wall is kind of broken, which I love this because this is a, non-canon team-up type game. Of course, they have to come up with some sort of lore on how this is all happening. One of Kratos' losing outro has him just punching the camera repeatedly, which is kind of a nod to God of War 3. Also, on the topic of God of War, there is a reference possibly to this game in the rebooted, or I guess it's not really rebooted, sequel series of God of War. Just a little clever line of dialogue, maybe acknowledging this existed.
Brother, I've heard my share of stories about your homeland, but I'd also heard that you once fought in a tournament.
I fought in many contests.
But this particular one, I heard you did battle with beasts, scoundrels, princesses, the undead, automatons, and history's greatest musician. That's not true, is it?
I would not speak of this.
Fair enough, brother.
We don't know for sure, but I'd like to think it's this. Zeus also seems to have some outros where he's a little angry at the camera from time to time as well. Honestly, there is a lot to love from this game. I think maybe they could have added a little more content to make it, more on par with what people expected from a Super Smash Bros. Type game, but I think this was a good start. I'm, once again, very sad that they never really did more with the PlayStation All-Star lineup. They didn't have to commit to doing, a battle type game every time. They could have done a kart racer. They could have done something else, but instead we just got nothing ever again, which I think is almost worse. I mean, there are a couple PlayStation related things that have acknowledgements down the road, but this was something special, and I think for what it was a cool thing.
During the PlayStation 3 era, Ratchet and Clank had 7 releases on the PlayStation 3 alone, and then some other spin-offs on the PlayStation Portable. The PlayStation 3 games include Ratchet and Clank Future Tools of Destruction, Ratchet and Clank Future Quest for Booty, Ratchet and Clank Future A Crank in Time, Ratchet and Clank All for One, then we got the Ratchet and Clank Collection, then we got Ratchet and Clank Full Frontal Assault, and then we got Ratchet and Clank Into the Nexus. Now, each of these games had some Easter eggs. So let's start off with Ratchet and Clank Tools of Destruction, which actually had multiple teddy bears hidden in different locations throughout the game. And for some of these you actually have to glitch way out of bounds to find, so it's pretty cool. It's kind of hard to verify, but I could find 3 of them for sure, but there might be more even. Also, this game had a secret cheat code for an outfit. If you press square, circle, up, triangle, down, up. This would unlock this jail outfit for Ratchet. Then going to Ratchet and Clank Quest for Booty, there's a couple more Easter eggs. Specifically, if you explore underwater, you can find this Captain Quark statue. And then also, if you keep looking some more, you can find this entrance to this underwater cave that takes you way deep. And if you follow the path, you can find this picture of Dan Johnson, or more so a picture of the Dan Johnson skin. Now, Dan Johnson was an artist that worked at Insomniac Games until he sadly passed away in 2006 during the development of Size Matters. Now, in the 2004 game Up Your Arsenal, he would be a multiplayer skin, and to kind of honor him, his colleagues and friends, I assume, would keep putting a skin for him into multiple Ratchet and Clank games going forward. Besides Quest for Booty, his skin would also show up in Secret Agent Clank, Tools of Destruction, A Crack in Time, All for One, and Full Frontal Assault. And besides putting his character skin in the game, they would keep honoring him in different ways even going into the future. The last Ratchet and Clank PS3 game, Into the Nexus, had a little homage to him. In the form of a statue that you can find in the Intergalactic Museum of History, and you could read the following museum entry for him. Here stands the heroic figure of Dan Johnson. Mr. Johnson once lived on a primitive planet called Earth, where he mixed techno music, raised cats, and discovered the often overlooked secret of enjoying life. Go outside, meet friends, and share their company while consuming delicious food and a sparkly beverage. But even beyond the PS3 era, they would honor his legacy. In the 2016 Ratchet & Clank game, he is an obtainable head mask. There would even be a little on-screen Easter egg for him in the Ratchet & Clank movie in 2016. And in the newest Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart, he appears as an action figure and a sticker from the Legends sticker pack. And honestly, I have to kind of say this is pretty wholesome that they keep the memory of their friend alive all these years later. Going over to Ratchet & Clank A Crack in Time, if you are in the Craig Clock, if you jump across the corner here and land on this little platform, you can find the butler Lawrence, just kind of chilling there and not doing too much. Also, you are able to find teddy bears again throughout the game. Now for the next game, Ratchet & Clank All for One, I could not find specific Easter eggs, but in the newest game, Rift Apart, you can go to Cirque's bar and there's an arcade machine, and the people who are playing on the arcade machine are playing Ratchet & Clank All for One. So there's a nice little callback to this game at least. Also, Elijah actually noticed something, so he's got to tell you about it real quick.
Let's talk about Ratchet & Clank All for One for a second, which was a pretty big deal for the PlayStation 3, am I right? Now, a few things. First of all, I didn't know this until I was doing research for this video, but the game was originally internally pitched as Ratchet & Clank 4-Play. They even did like a box art mock-up, but the name was not approved, so that's not surprising. So they ended up changing it to All for One. But this was one of the few cool games to have an Easter egg, not actually in the game, but in real life, in the form of the game that you bought yourself. The box art is actually reversible with a little hidden Easter egg in itself. You could switch the box art around and it would look like this. Instead of playing Ratchet & Clank All for One, you get Copernicus Quirk's awesomely epic 3D adventure through time and space. Honestly, that's not a bad name choice either. Only on PlayStation, of course. Also, since we're on the topic of Ratchet & Clank All for One on the PS3, there was also the whole multiplayer mode, and there was different character skins that you could choose from, and a lot of these skins are references to various things. I don't know every single reference because my knowledge on the Ratchet & Clank series is a little bit limited, but I'm sure I'm understanding that there are callbacks to previous games and other games that aren't even Ratchet & Clank or even Sony. Like, I'm pretty sure this is a reference to the Metroid series, which is Nintendo, but, you know, different enough to not get sued. Because Nintendo loves to sue. I mean, hey, it's a Ratchet & Clank spin-off game. I mean, what can you expect? There's not a whole lot, but at least a little bit there. I mean, sure, the game wasn't as good as like a mainline game, but it was something.
In Ratchet & Clank Full Frontal Assault, you can sometimes hear like the trollolololol song. The one that goes like trollolololololololol. You guys know which one I'm talking about. Also, if you play Full Frontal Assault on Christmas Day and you equip the Alpha Zircon at level 5, I'm not sure if it has to be level 5, but if you equip it on that day, there's a chance he'll say like Merry Christmas. Then the last Ratchet & Clank entry in the PS3 era was Ratchet & Clank Into the Nexus. During one of the cutscenes, Ratchet opens up his toolbox and a bunch of stuff starts floating around because they're in space, and one of the things that is floating away is a Captain Quark statue. A new Twisted Metal also released for the PlayStation 3 in 2012, and there's one major cutscene that has a ton of references to older Metal Gear games or other PlayStation titles. This cutscene pans across this shelf with like different trophies and stuff, and most of the trophies are a reference to something, so let's go through them. You got the 2 flight tickets from Mike and Stu's ending in Twisted Metal 2.
What can I do for you, gentlemen?
We won the game, right? So you gotta give us our prize. Well, we want...
No, dude. Say demand.
Okay. We demand that you give us the ability to fly.
Certainly.
That is so cool.
Congratulations. I have granted your wish. Have a great time in the friendly skies.
Let's go!
Wow!
Hey, man. This can't be right.
Good thing these first-class tickets are refundable.
You got the 3 bricks from Simon Withelbone's tower in Twisted Metal 2 as well.
I am the greatest. Do you hear me, world? You people are all tiny ants to me now. No one will ever be as high or as great as me. Damn it! I am Simon Withelbone. I am God. Whoa.
And then there's the brown paperback from the Needle Cane's ending in Twisted Metal 1995.
Do you know what they did? Do you? Now it's my turn. It's my world. It's my word. It's my turn. It's my day.
There's also the voodoo dolls from Raven's ending in Twisted Metal Black.
An eye for an eye, blood for blood. It was the code of the witch. It's weird. As I pushed that first pin down, I felt something give. It was like pushing into a person. And from far away, I could have sworn I heard someone screaming. It took 2 days for the cops to find the bodies.
There's the plates that Kratos uses in the God of War series also. There's a teddy bear from Ancient Stone's cutscene in Twisted Metal Black as well.
I'd let my emotions cloud my judgment. It cost me, but it cost someone else even more. Oh my God! What had I done?
And then there is the Flight 1745 recorder box from Commander Mason's and Agent Stone's ending in Twisted Metal. There's also John Doe's wallet and FBI ID from Twisted Metal Black. Also from Twisted Metal Black is the key to Dollface's mask. The flask from Charlie Kane's deleted ending in Twisted Metal 1995 is also here.
Oh, that's strange. It tastes like...
The rusted helmet from Amanda Watts ending in Twisted Metal 2 can also be found. The boxing clasps are actually the one that No Face has in his cutscene in Twisted Metal Black. Then there's the PlayStation 2 game War of the Monsters on display, Mr. Crimm's license plate, Needless Kane's machete, Dollface's masks, Twisted Metal 2 on PlayStation, and then an unknown PlayStation game that you can't really make out. Some people think it's Warhawk, some people think it's the first Twisted Metal.
To this day, it still surprises me that Persona 5 originally released on the PlayStation 3 and PS4, but it came out on the PS3. Like, what the box art alone is just crazy to me. This is like a modern game still in my head, even though it came out in 2016. There's a lot of Easter eggs to unpack, so we're gonna go through them really quickly because the references alone are pretty incredible. On April 29th, there's a TV spot that talks about the new Detective Prince, which makes a reference to the original Detective Prince, who is Naoto in Persona 4. In July, there is a TV spot about Rise returning as an idol, who was a character in Persona 4 who was struggling with the whole being famous as a teenager thing, and she just wanted to take a break for a while. Well, in Persona 5, I guess we find out that she's back. In December, there's a couple of interesting things, like for instance, a television interview with Yukari from Persona 3 talking about playing Featherman Pink in Featherman, which Featherman in itself is an Easter egg reference to the Super Sentai series, which is super popular in Japan. There's the TV talking about Inaba, the town from Persona 4. There's a reference to the local election, and Taro Namatame is apparently running again. If you don't know Persona and don't know what that means, that's okay too, don't worry about it. There's a few references to some of the crimes that were featured in Persona 4, and there's of course more references to other characters from the Persona series like Chie, Akihiko, and even Katsuya, who was in Persona 2 Eternal Punishment. In the second to last dungeon, there's this restaurant that plays music from Persona 4 Golden. There's a claw machine in Akihabara that plays 8-bit music, which the song that gets played here is actually the Junes theme from Persona 4. There's posters of Rise that you can see in Shibuya Station in the underground. And while there's a ton of parodies in Persona 5, whether it's some of the things that happen in the movie theaters to other little references like renting DVDs from the movie rental store in this game being a reference to a real television series like Beverly Hills 90210 type thing. Sometimes these things will also play little music nods to the Persona series. Also, Persona 5 uses a lot of different musical themes that are kind of present across the entire Persona series, where some clever notes that are used or melodies that are used are references to other Persona songs, and it all just builds off of each other into one crazy culmination. But listen to this Persona song. And now listen to this Persona song. And then listen to this Persona song. You can You see how there's this like leitmotif going on between all of these versions? Really cool stuff. Love this game series. There's actually a figure of Teddy that you can get as a gift from Haru in November if you go with her in Asakusa. Also remember that Crane game from earlier. Inside the Crane game is Jack Frost, who is the mascot for the entire Shin Megami Tensei universe, which this is a game in that game series. You can also find a Catherine figurine found in Futaba's room, and that's obviously another game technically in the Shin Megami Tensei universe, so another connection here. There's an accessory item called Sonic Socks that give you +5 agility, and it makes sense as a Sega game. Futaba will occasionally make references to both Star Wars and World of Warcraft through some of her dialogue. There's also a handful of clever Danganronpa references. There's this one, and then there's this Crane game one where Morgana will even make a statement about maybe seeing this somewhere. It's funny because Aoi Asahina and Morgana have the same English voice actor, so it's like a little clever thing. Like we mentioned earlier, Catherine is a part of the Persona and Shin Megami universe, and that game also originally released during the PS3, Xbox 360 era. In the Stray Sheep bar, you can actually see a Teddy doll here, which is kind of a cool little nod. Also at the bar, you can see a Kokon High from Persona 3.
The PlayStation 3 era also had the game PlayStation Move Heroes, which is a crossover game between 3 iconic Sony franchises, Ratchet and Clank, Jak and Daxter, and Sly Cooper. This game was made for the PlayStation Move controllers that were introduced the year prior, and I couldn't really find any specific Easter eggs, but the inclusion of the main characters itself is kind of a, reference to the franchises that are featured in it. The playable characters include Daxter from Jak and Daxter, Ratchet from Ratchet and Clank, Jak from Jak and Daxter, Sly Cooper from Sly Cooper, Clank from Ratchet and Clank, and Bentley from Sly Cooper as well.
Now, as we all know, God of War started before the PlayStation 3 era. However, a big deal for the PlayStation 3's life was, of course, the big release of God of War 3, where it came out in early 2010. This was the first God of War game that didn't release on the PlayStation 2, and kind of was like an epic conclusion to like a 3-part story introduced from the first God of War game. Now, if you think you're going to go back and play God of War 3 and you don't want spoilers for something that happens in the story, skip ahead just a short bit. But in God of War 3, Kratos wants to go and seek revenge against his own father Zeus, and he kind of does so. So this being a definitive moment in the PlayStation 3 era makes sense. But what's funny is we do see a callback to this PlayStation 3 era God of War game in the newer God of War games, the 2018 one, through a little bit of a funny dialogue moment from that game, which references the PS3 stuff.
Guess I shouldn't be surprised. I did the same thing to my dad when I was his age.
He killed his own father?
God of War 3 actually had quite a few things hidden in it as itself, and it was really cool to see these little Easter eggs all these years later that I never saw originally. All the way back in the day, it was a big deal if you went and got every single trophy available in a video game on the PlayStation, and God of War 3 was no exception. If you actually got the Platinum Trophy, there was a secret reference to the website www.spartansstandtall.com. What is this? Well, what it would actually serve as was a website and secret little announcement to promote the next big PSP game in the God of War series, Ghost of Sparta. Kind of a cool little thing hidden here. Of course, a classic we see in Easter eggs when it comes to video games is the famous Wilhelm scream, which does show up in God of War 3 during the opening cutscene at the beginning of a new game. When you see like the monsters fighting here, you can hear the little Wilhelm scream. Also, in the underworld section of the game, there's a lot of different letters that players can interact with and get some cool insights to the world of God of War. But there is an interesting letter that references how someone feels like they could have been saved, that they were a boat captain, and they're a little bit bitter. And essentially, this is just a reference back to the first God of War game, where Kratos drops the captain down into the Hydra King's mouth. And he also showed up in God of War 2 as like a little reference as well. Also, there's this whole section where like there's, I don't know, blood lava. I don't know what to call this. And we hear like different phrases quoted out or yelled out. And there's this one line where it says, a Spartan never lets his back hit the ground, which is interesting because this is an Easter egg, but it's also foreshadowing, as this was to tie into Ghost of Sparta, which was going to come out like 8 whole months after this game had come out. And it's a dialogue that Deimos says in that game.
A Spartan never lets his back hit the ground. Right, brother?
So they kind of did some foreshadowing and made it into a little Easter egg. And I think it's really cool when like the developers had that foresight to put something in the game that far ahead.
Demon's Souls was another PS3 exclusive that was kind of a banger back in the day. And I mean, as Elijah said earlier, it started the Souls genre, and that's still a popular genre to this day. We just got a new Elden Ring game announced, and I'm pretty excited for it. Nonetheless, there's a character called Patches that shows up in a lot of From Software games, from Armored Core to Dark Souls to Elden Ring, and he shows up in the original Demon Souls as well.
Do any of you guys remember the game Journey? It was kind of this unexpected but really cool game that just kind of took you on a journey. Get it? Nonetheless, this game, while visually beautiful, actually had a lot going on and some clever secrets as well. Like, for instance, in the temple area, after you clear the fog out, if you head down to the bottom area, you can find this little character here. He's kind of just chilling, flying around or whatever. But this character is actually the main character from the development studio's previous game, Flow, which obviously was a much smaller scale game than what Journey would end up being, but kind of cool nonetheless. Similarly, way out here in the sand dunes, there's like a single yellow flower just chilling out there, which is another reference to a previous game the development teams worked on, which was just called Flower. We're getting somewhere with these names, I'm sure. And then, of course, I don't know if this counts as an Easter egg, but I feel like it's important because it was such a cool thing when the game came out. There is this whole part where, you know, you think you're playing through a single player game, but it actually is secretly kind of an online game. And while you're just doing your thing, another like character will just like show up and sometimes help you or do some stuff with you. And that's pretty cool. And I think there was like a lot of like curiosity when this first started happening where people were like, was that an NPC or something? But no, it's a real player connected to you and you could go and help other players. And that was just like a really interesting technique that they implemented. And I think it made the game feel more meaningful and alive, but also like, you know, still mysterious because it's not like, you know, they just have open voice chat and they start trash talking you, telling you you're bad at the game like a Call of Duty lobby. No, it's like a part of the atmosphere and world building by having, you know, other people's experiences shared at the same time. And I think that was a really cool thing that Journey did. Also, while we're on the topic of Journey, there is this interesting Easter egg that came up in God of War Ragnarok that kind of pays a little homage to Journey. You know, it's cool to see Journey kind of mentioned all these years later in the form of an Easter egg. So in God of War Ragnarok, there's this bookshelf, and on the bookshelf, there are all types of books, and they're essentially like referencing maybe the greatest hits of PlayStation that are like first-party PlayStation games. And down here at the bottom of the shelf, the last one is a little nod to Journey. I mean, there's other cool ones here as well that don't necessarily fall into the PS3 era, like Astrobot or Horizon Zero Dawn. Now, every single one of these little Easter egg books do have a poem associated with it. So Journey, being a PS3 game, does get, you know, a little more than just a symbol. It has a little poem to go with it as well. But yeah, look, there's the MLB, the league's even here. That's what the baseball's for. There's obviously a reference to The Last of Us, specifically The Last of Us Part 2, where this poem's called We Who Remain Part the Second. I don't know, that's silly. There's a Death Stranding one. There's even one for Dreams. There's Concrete Genie. Then, tying it all back together to another PS3 era hit, Uncharted is referenced here as well with a book called Upon Pursuing a Place Not Marked on Maps, which is a long roundabout way of saying Uncharted. Ghost of Tsushima and Order 1886 also are referenced. Also, I didn't realize there were also poems for Days Gone and Bloodborne, so, you know, even more.
Sly Cooper Thieves in Time, which was the fourth mainline Sly Cooper game, also released on the PlayStation 3, and this game has some major callbacks to one of the main villains from the first couple games. If you played specifically the first game, you might remember Clockwork, a mechanic owl that is the mortal enemy of the Cooper family. Yeah, listen up, Sly Cooper lore. Anyways, I think this guy used to be a normal owl and then he turned himself into a machine to be stronger, yada yada yada. And though he was defeated in an earlier game, he still appears in the fourth game, Sly Cooper Thieves in Time. There's actually quite a few hidden Easter eggs where he appears. In the episode Turning Japanese, he can be found during the job Prettier in Pink if you look northwest of the Geisha building. Also in the same episode on the job Photo Op, you can spot Clockwork on top of the Imperial Prison. In the episode Go West Young Raccoon, there's 3 appearances of Clockwork, the first one being in the job Blind Date, where he is above a windmill on a house near the water tower. Then in Stone Age Reconnaissance, you can view Clockwork atop the waterfall, and in Starving Hippo, you can find Clockwork at the start of the mission. Then off Mice and Mechs, there is 2 more jobs that that have clockwork in him, one in Shopping Spree, where you can spot clockwork on the clock tower, and then also in Hard Target you can find clockwork on top of a tower by a castle. And finally on 40 Thieves, during the job Copycats, you can see clockwork in the treasure room way in the distance. But besides just referencing the earlier games, there's also a ton of pop culture references and other things hidden throughout the game. So I'm just gonna start listing them. Bentley's ultimate costume resembles Judge Dredd's outfit and includes a description referencing the character's stern judgment. You know Bentley will reign supreme and execute some code. During the alter ego hacking job, a voice can be heard saying, "What are you doing, Bentley?" which mimics Hall 9000's line, "Just what do you think you're doing, Dave?" from 2001: A Space Odyssey. The Cooper van's time travel mechanism also resembles that of the DeLorean from Back to the Future, including the fire tracks it leaves behind and the spinning license plate, and also you can see the plans for it that feature a flux capacitor. In Go West, young raccoon Tennessee slides under the closing door and retrieves his head, echoing Indiana Jones's iconic scene. Also in 40 Thieves, Salim reacts to Cobras with "Snakes, why did it have to be snakes?" which is another line from Indiana Jones.
Snakes! Why does it have to be snakes?
Also, Murray's fight with the Les Paradox Red Guards in Paris parallels Neo's escape from multiple Smiths in The Matrix. There's also 2 Star Wars lines being referenced in this game, the first one being in Turning Japanese, where Sly impersonates a guard and remarks, "A little short to be a commander," which echoes a line from Leia in A New Hope.
A little short to be a commander, aren't you?
And also there's still eyeing "Great shooting, kid, but don't get cocky," which mirrors Han Solo's line to Luke.
Yeah, great shooting, kid, but don't get cocky.
Also, Bentley is a turtle, and he recalls being in the sewers as a teenager, which, I mean, that's obviously a reference to Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Interesting. The last time I was in these sewers, I was just a teenager.
But besides just movies and TV shows, there's also like some mythology and folklore referenced throughout the game. Obviously, the episode called 40 Thieves is a reference to Alibaba in the 40 Thieves. Also in the job Rugrats, Salim wishes for a magic lamp, which is another nod to Aladdin.
Oh, if only I had a magic lamp. I would wish for this job to be over.
Also, the moat monster resembles a classic Hydra, which can be found in stuff like Disney's Hercules, but obviously also could be inspired by King Ghidorah from Godzilla. Then there's also references to other video games like Ratchet and Clank, where you collect 50 slime masks to unlock Ratchet's wrench and bolts, which doubles coin value. Also, the medieval Metalman treasure resembles Clank in knight armor. Also, the treasure in Lutrella Nivadensis resembles Dexter in a caveman attire. Obviously, Dexter from Jak and Daxter. Also, you can unlock the amp from Infamous 2, which will replace Sly's weapon. Also, the cake in Murray's cutscene resembles Portal's Black Forest cake. And during Ice Ice Bentley, paintbrushes with colors matching Aku Aku's feathers appear. You remember those little things from Crash Bandicoot that will go Aku Aku? Also, I don't know why I forgot about these earlier, but also the mission Ice Ice Bentley is a reference to the Vanilla Ice song Ice Ice Baby. And I mentioned the job Rugrats earlier, which obviously the name itself is a reference to the television show Rugrats. Also, there's some more costume references, like Sly's ultimate costume resembles the Batsuit, and Carmelita's ultimate costume may also be a nod to Catwoman. Bentley's alter ego minigame features him in a Rambo-like outfit, and then also the whole training montage with Bob is obviously reminiscent of the Rocky movies. And then also in Saloon Bug, you see Bentley throwing drinks to guards in a minigame, and this minigame is actually a reference to the classic 1984 video game Tapper, which was produced to promote Anheuser-Busch branding and was released by Sega, and also was re-released after the Budweiser partnership ended as Root Beer Tapper. Also, when you defeat Wildman Wiesner, Murray shouts, "Nobody sucker punches the Murray," which could be a reference to Sucker Punch Productions, the original development studio for the Sly Cooper games.
Nobody sucker punches the Murray!
There's actually a really interesting God of War Easter egg in the game Heavenly Sword, which not a lot of people remember even existing, but it was this 2007 hack and slash video game developed by Ninja Theory that was exclusive for the PlayStation 3. Wild to think about that Ninja Theory is now an Xbox game studio, as well as everything else Xbox has ever acquired. But yeah, if you look at the armory, or you go, deep in the armory during Kai's mission in this game, you can find Kratos' sword and armor from God of War. So, a little connected thing going on here. Now, it did seem like there was more, intents and purposes for what Heavenly Sword would become. However, the game didn't really, I guess, do as well sales-wise to warrant much more happening. So while there were plans for a sequel at one point, that fell through. There was some attempts to do like an animated series, a film, you know how that goes. Some of them had limited releases, some of them didn't exist at all. And then the last thing we've really seen from this series that was kind of like a shorter God of War type inspired game was, I guess, the character's inclusion in the PlayStation All-Stars Battle Royale, which obviously had a bunch of Easter eggs in it. But yeah, as far as this game's concerned, there's probably more Easter eggs out there that have gone undiscovered since the game wasn't relatively as popular as other games, but still kind of an interesting piece that I'm sure some people still remember. Okay, real quick, show of hands here. How many people remember the game SOCOM 4? Like, it's such a weird thing to talk about nowadays because of how massive this game series was in the PS2 and PS3 era, but yeah, SOCOM 4 was kind of a game that was hyped up quite a bit. Kind of a big deal for 2011, which was kind of after like Call of Duty was big and Medal of Honor was trying to come back and there was Battlefield and all these types of things, and there's SOCOM on the PlayStation 3. But this game surprisingly had a few Easter eggs that I wasn't expecting to actually see. Like over here, if you look on top of this, like, I don't know, machinery, it says the word Team November, and I couldn't figure out what this meant. I thought maybe it was the name of the development studio, which it wasn't, and a quick Google search didn't yield me much results. So if anyone knows what's going on with Team November, please let me know. I'm just curious. If you go to this specific window out here, you can actually see way down kind of below on this ledge where you normally wouldn't look. It similarly has text, and this time it says I Heart Coffee, which is probably a little more straightforward than a Team November secret, but still, mysterious text in this SOCOM 4 game. Kind of interesting, right? I don't know, it just seemed like the development team had a lot of fun hiding secret messages all over the place. There's another one that's like in this factory. If you jump out this window on a ledge, you can see it say the real SOCOM. This one's kind of funny because I feel like SOCOM 4 ended up being maybe the least liked SOCOM game out of like the ones that were really popular. I don't know. SOCOM 4 wasn't just what people expected it to be. So it is funny that this is the real SOCOM. There is a cool little secret Easter egg though hidden in the 11th chapter of the campaign. There's like a fork in the road where you have to choose if you want to go left or right. And essentially if you say you want to go one way, but then you go the other way and you go up into this building, you can find a little laptop, and next to the laptop there's a radio, and the radio plays the main menu music from SOCOM 4, but with a little 8-bit twist to it. Sounds kind of cool. Take a listen.
Motorstorm for the PS3 was kind of this interesting off-road racing game that was a lot of fun. And during the PlayStation 3 era, there was 5 games released in this series. Not all on PlayStation 3, but still the home console got 3 main ones, with Motorstorm, Motorstorm Pacific Rift, and Motorstorm Apocalypse. By the way, there was also the third Motorstorm called Motorstorm Arctic Edge that was released on PSP and PS2 in 2009. Just kind of a weird fact I thought I'd throw in here. Nonetheless, all of these Motorstorm games had their own unique setting. The first one was like desert races, Pacific Rim focused on like tropical islands and the rainforest, and in Apocalypse you could find these city tracks, but like the apocalypse happened, so it was in ruins. Nonetheless, these games had some pretty cool Easter eggs. Starting off with the first Motorstorm, the Welcome to Monument Valley sign on the Grizzly has the phrase "Please drive carefully" altered with the word "carefully" covered by corrugated metal, so it says "Please drive." The Motorstorm logo actually also can be found in game on this sign that was supposed to say "Welcome to Monument Valley," but instead it says "Welcome to Motorstorm." The bridges have warning lights with smiley faces drawn on them. Also, the studio had this ongoing gag they would do where they would talk about how the studios would get fined for speeding or, prosecuted for speeding offenses. And the point of it was that their games are so groundbreaking in speed that, they might as well get convicted for this. A reference to this can be found on this banner at the start of Dust Devils that says "Free the Runcorn 4." The extras menu includes a concept video featuring a parody of the BBC test card F with a motocross rider replacing the young girl in the middle. The barrels on the tractor Grizzly have these smiley face designs on them, and that smiley face resembles the iconic Nirvana symbol. Now moving on to Motorstorm Pacific Rift, there wasn't as many Easter eggs, but there was some callbacks to the previous game. So in the first game there was some cars that only the AI could drive, or some variants of cars that only the AI could drive. One of them being the Big Joe Chili Dogs Bushwhacker car, which can be found in Pacific Rift wrecked outside the map, and it's also not usable. But here it is. Similarly, you can find the Marshall variant of the Patriot Surger also outside the map, another car that was driven by AI in the original Motorstorm game. They would kind of continue this trend with Motorstorm Apocalypse, the third game on the PlayStation 3 in this franchise, where you can find a wrecked version of the Castro Robusto truck that was featured in the first two games on the track Good Herb. Once again, this is only like a prop that you can't interact with and you can never drive this car, but it's still here. Also on the white truck you can see the Motorstorm helmet logo with some bones beneath it. On the track Interstate you can find this burger restaurant called Jaffe, and this is a reference to the video game designer David Jaffe, who did not directly work on Motorstorm but was kind of a prominent person around the PlayStation development cycles. And also apparently he was a big fan of the Motorstorm series, as he mentioned in an interview once. On Boardwalk you can find a sign that says Colossus, which could be a reference to the track from the Pacific Rift game Colossus Canyon. Also, most likely when this game was released, they were already developing the next Motorstorm game called Motorstorm RC for the PlayStation Vita, which was an RC-focused Motorstorm game. And they were most likely teasing this game in one of the cutscenes in this game, where you can see two of the characters, Tyler and Mesh, racing RC cars. And both of them have like the RC version of their signature car. This building on the track Skyline has posters of Monument Valley from the first game and also a poster for The Island from Pacific Rift. And then in the intro cinematic for the Lunatics Unite version of The Rock, there's two supercars that can be seen kind of drifting in a figure 8 motion, which is a callback to a background cutscene that was featured in the original Motorstorm with a Patriot Renegade and a Jester Super BXR doing the same movement.
Now the PlayStation 3 era was really interesting because not only did it get a Gran Turismo exclusive, but it got two Gran Turismo exclusives, as Gran Turismo 6 also released on the PlayStation 3. And that big Gran Turismo fan, Too Fast For You, has once again documented so many different secrets and Easter eggs online. And to this day, he's still documenting stuff on forums like gtplanet.net. So let's look through some of the secrets hidden in this game because, I don't know, for a racing game, I'm surprised with how much there actually is hidden here. Like way more than you would think for a game like this. Things you would never notice. Like look at this sign here. There's different directions to go and Indiana Jones is in one of the directions. Why? I don't know, but it's here. One of the vehicles, here's the name of the vehicle on the screen because I can't remember it off the top of my head while I'm recording this, has different symbols hidden away here in the headlights. And what are those symbols? PlayStation buttons. Look at that. How cool. If you look closely at one of the possible wheels that you can have, I guess, like steering wheels. I'm sorry guys, I'm not a car guy. I don't know the technical terms that I'm supposed to be using, but I'm pretty sure that these buttons aren't stock on these cars. There's a drink button, a reset button, a rage button, a pit button. Is that for pit maneuvers? What does a flash button do? Look at this stick here. Is that the Microsoft logo in there? How could they do this? Microsoft is the enemy of Sony, right? I mean, that's really not that big of a deal. But how would we have known this was in the game if we didn't have a user like Too Fast For You documenting it all these years later? There's a memorial for some guy named Freddie Charlier. Charlier? I don't know. But it's here. There's the Gran Turismo logo hidden in another building, just like Gran Turismo 5. There's a sign that is a reference, or I don't know, is this a reference? This is just like brand product placement at this point for Sonic the Hedgehog over here. And then he even went and like archived a bunch of photos of just like zoom-ins on random background characters. I mean, yeah, they're like PNGs, but like you're usually driving super fast. You're not going to be looking at these little details. But I don't know, they're kind of interesting. Like look at this guy just chilling in the back of his SUV, hanging out. Who's that standing next to his car? I don't know. It's so surreal seeing this, but I kind of miss this era as well of like background decorations, especially when things like maybe developers over here that are standing in this picture are out in the distance and you can see them. I don't know, occasionally there's just like random people standing there staring off at the race from the distance, and it just looks so funny when you just see the screenshot of it. It's probably developers, but still a cool thing, even if it's a little unsettling. Also in the distance there's this sign that says end of can't. Like what does that mean? End of can't? That's how I feel sometimes when I'm hearing whatever the Halo series is up to nowadays. Now at the same time, Gran Turismo 6 does recycle some of the little Easter eggs from previous games, especially when it's like a returning location. So like the Loch Ness Monster will show up again, the monkey, the rock faces and whatnot. They're all here. So yeah, some cool stuff coming out of Gran Turismo 6. Now, of course, Call of Duty played a major role in all of PlayStation Easter eggs. Call of Duty in general was a massive deal during this era in gaming. Now, if you're new to this channel, welcome. Not too long ago, we did a similar video where we looked at every single classic Xbox 360 Easter egg, And of course, Call of Duty was talked about there as well. So we will be doing a little bit of double dipping into that video a bit here. But seriously, some of the stuff is really cool, so it's worth watching. And maybe when you're done, check out the Xbox 360 Easter egg video too, because there's so much in there as well. Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare, the first Call of Duty game to bring things into the modern era. And with that, there were some interesting things hidden away in these games that were kind of iconic for its time. On the campaign level, the coup at the very beginning, when you're being brought to the vehicle, you'll see these signs up here that are in Arabic, but if you actually translate them directly, they translate to Infinity Ward, the name of the developer that made Call of Duty 4. Did you guys know at the end of Call of Duty 4, there was a Call of Duty Modern Warfare rap? This is actually crazy that this exists.
In the mind and time, you'll find my lines, combining the twine, underline, rhyme, divine, no harm.
Also, Call of Duty kind of picked up the trend and Easter egg that had been ongoing at this point in the Call of Duty franchise of hiding teddy bears across various campaign levels and multiplayer levels. This shows up in a lot of Call of Duty games down the road, but Call of Duty 4 really stepped it up as there are teddy bears all over the place. If you've seen the movie War Games, you might recognize this computer here, which actually shows up in the campaign level No Fighting in the War Room, as the computer was hidden here as a little nod to that movie. And then on the campaign level Crew Expendable, there are quotes from the movie Aliens.
I like to keep this for close encounters.
I'd like to keep this handy for close encounters.
This is 106, we're on our way out. On your feet, soldier, we are leaving. Frank, we are leaving.
Also, in that first level, if you fail to make the jump, the text on the screen will say no one makes it on the first jump, which is a reference to the movie Matrix. There's a lot of movie references actually in Call of Duty 4. We won't go into all of them, but one of my favorite ones is on Mile High Club when we get the line, "Don't call me Shirley," which is a reference to the movie Airplane.
We're going deep and we're going hard.
Surely you can't be serious.
I'm serious. And don't call me Shirley.
Surely you can't be serious. I am serious. And don't call me Shirley.
Over on the multiplayer map Shipment, you can actually see different symbols referencing Call of Duty 4 and Infinity Ward. Then if we load up on the DLC map Chinatown, this map is actually a remake of the classic map Carrington, which some of you might remember if you're an OG Call of Duty player. There are secret teddy bears hidden on this multiplayer map as well, even one inside of a TV. Also, we talked about that earlier level, the coup, where you're like going in that car and you're a prisoner and whatnot. You can actually see a drawing of the lead developer Jason West as graffiti on one of the walls while you're driving past. If you load on the multiplayer map Showdown and you find this chicken over here, it's in this like secret spot, but it's kind of just dancing, chilling out, having a good time. Over on the multiplayer map Backlot, you can find another Easter egg of the Infinity Ward logo over here. And as with the common trend across Call of Duty games, a lot of the developers are names of the random extra soldiers, and you can see a Marine named Roysowicz on the Bog, which is one of the main design developers who worked on Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare and worked on later Call of Duty games as well. Yeah, Call of Duty 4 definitely had some interesting things with it. In Call of Duty World at War, if you jumped into certain puddles on the second level of the campaign and like crouched in them long enough, eventually these statues will come out of the ground and they contain a ray gun from the popular Zombies mode, but this technically was the first appearance of the ray gun, and you can use it in the campaign level, which is pretty cool. Yeah, Call of Duty World at War had some really interesting Easter eggs hidden throughout this game. Like, for instance, at the beginning of the first campaign level, there's this Marine here. His name is Private Ryan, and he can be attacked by this soldier, but if you save him, you get an achievement for saving Private Ryan, like the movie. Many of you are familiar with 115 being like a staple in Call of Duty Zombies lore, but the first time 115 actually ever showed up was in a cutscene for the campaign talking about how hot the temperatures in Japan would get during some of the summer months in the Pacific front. We see 115 show up here, and I think 115 originally served as like just a general recurring number Easter egg like we've seen in a lot of games before it became solidified with the whole element 115 aspect of Call of Duty Zombies. The entire sniper level vendetta is very obviously and heavily inspired by the 90s film Enemy at the Gates. I mean, you can see so many visual visual similarities. It's actually really interesting. Call of Duty World at War was also interesting in the fact that it had these hidden collectibles called death cards, which were kind of like Intel, but they're a little harder to find, and they were these special cards that were on rifles in various locations in the campaign, and once you collected them, they would be used as a modifier if you wanted to mix up the campaign experience. And they had like different things like having the enemies able to do interesting things like come back from the dead or something. I'm honestly surprised death cards never made a return in the future. Then of course, hidden at the end of the credits originally when Call of Duty World at War first came out was the special zombies mode, which ended up becoming the biggest thing in Call of Duty as just like a little side mode that turned into a giant thing. In itself, it's kind of an Easter egg, but there are Easter eggs, of course, within the Easter eggs of zombies. The first map was pretty basic. There were a few little Easter eggs here and there, like writings on the wall. If you stabbed the radio here, it would start playing music, which was pretty cool. It was a simple but very effective Easter egg that opened the gates for a ton of content in the future and a lot more Easter eggs to come. After Call of Duty World at War's release in 2009, there would be 3 Call of Duty World at War DLCs that would release, all that had some interesting Easter eggs, especially because for Call of Duty World at War, this was a big deal, and for Call of Duty as a franchise as a whole, because more zombie maps were being added, and that opened up the huge rabbit hole that is modern day Call of Duty zombie Easter eggs. And it all started back with World at War. So in the first map pack, the big zombie map that came with it was Verrucht, or for Americans, Verrucht. This map took us to the Asylum multiplayer map, but transformed into a zombies level, and there were some really interesting things. Like for instance, if you lay down over here, you can hear like crying, which is really creepy. If you go over to the drill and hold X, you can hear like the sound of some sort of drill revving up. What else was there? There was this room that had all sorts of numbers and scribblings on the wall that would all relate back to various things that would expand the zombie universe even more, which was kind of neat. But my favorite one was over here. If you flush the toilet 3 times, you get a secret song that plays. And it kind of was a banger. It was Lullaby by a Dead Man by Elena Segman. I mean, it slapped and started the trend of music Easter eggs becoming a thing in every zombies map moving forward. The first zombies map in World at War, like we talked about, only had a little radio knifing thing, and it wouldn't be until the Black Ops version later on where they would even add like the secret guitar song when you blew up all of the barrels. So this was a big monumental moment in COD Easter egg history. Now, a few months later, after this first map pack came out, we got a second follow-up map pack 2, and this one had people in Japan in Shinonuma. Now, there were a couple of really creepy things hidden in this one, like this dude that's just like hanging out up here. You could knock him down with grenades, and they never put this Easter egg back in a future Call of Duty game. You could never knock him down outside of this Call of Duty, I believe. And when you knocked him down, if you stood over his body, you would just instant die and reset, and the zombies would be like 50, 60 times harder. It was like the curse of this weird Shinonuma character. Also, this map had little radio logs that you could activate and hear into some more detail as to what was going on in the background in this weird zombies Call of Duty universe that was just starting to unfold at the very beginning of everything. Remember, this was before the days of time travel and multiverses. We were just getting characters established here, so little things were interesting. Sprinkled around this map were references to a potential meteor strike, and Element 115 was starting to become a thing, and if you explore things even deeper here, you could find the meteor out of bounds, kind of, like in this area that you wouldn't normally see unless you were looking explicitly for it, and then on top of that, there was this weird radio inside of one of the huts, and if you activated the phone radio thing, it would like ring for a bit, nobody would be there, there'd be some creepy whispering, and then boom, the secret Easter egg song would be activated once again, this time being The One, which certified banger. It was solid.
I have found a delicious tune.
And then finally, as summer was beginning to end in 2009, we got one final map pack for World at War, which brought us Der Riese zombies, or Americans would call it Der Riese. And damn, was there a lot of Easter eggs in this one. Okay, we'll just go through them real quickly. There's these little like radios scattered around that play like audio logs. If you throw a monkey bomb inside of this furnace, it starts screaming and Samantha starts yelling at you. If you shoot a button that's out of bounds with a pack-a-punched weapon, all these teddy bears start floating up, and then they fly around the map, and you have to play like hide and seek, and that's a thing. There's another dude just like hanging out over here out of bounds. There's like a message that's like in the ground that disappears if you look at it long enough. If you run around and you activate the 3 vials that are in random locations, all of a sudden another song starts playing, Beauty of Annihilation, which best song at that time so far out of the zombie songs. Like they just kept getting better and better.
I have found a delicious tune.
There was pictures here that was referencing future zombie maps that were supposed to be in a map pack 4 that never ended up happening, and those maps later would return in Call of Duty Black Ops, but they would be changed dramatically. Occasionally when you were teleporting, some weird things could happen from time to time. I don't know, the moon looked scary. This was an awesome map, and it had a ton of Easter eggs, and I really appreciate World at War to this day for just how much the bar was raised with each DLC pack that came out. Now, if you played Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2, you probably remember a lot of the different Easter eggs that showed up in that game, because there was quite a bit, and of course, we're not going to talk about every single detail like we already did in this super long Call of Duty video, but there are some interesting ones that we want to mention at least here as we do this nostalgia trip through the Xbox Live days. On the multiplayer map Nuketown, if you go over to the telephone on the wall, you can actually see a little reference to Call of Duty 4 here for whatever reason. Also on Terminal, if you look at the flights here, you can see a flight for something that looks like it's Leet Speak from the late 2000s. Similarly, you can see more Leet Speak on the train on Derail. There's a couple of fake video game consoles laying around in various places, like we found the Black Box 6 game system on Skid Row. There's also this system called the Game Station 5 with the game Deer Hunter 17. Now obviously Burger Town made its big debut in Modern Warfare 2, and it's a play on Burger King, like a parody, but there's other restaurants nearby that also were plays on other restaurants that are real too, that just never got as much attention as Burger King and Burger Town initially did. Like for instance, there's this taco place, and it's obviously a play on Taco Bell, but they sell burgers. The same burgers that Burger Town sells. I always think that this is like some big conspiracy theory. Then there's a TGI Fridays looking place here, but it's obviously not TGI Fridays. If you pay close attention to the graffiti in any Infinity Ward game, you'll notice that a lot of the times, in one way or another, the graffiti is a reference to the name of a developer who worked on the game, which is pretty clever. Whether it's like initials or a nickname or something, it's usually something that's hidden around. You can sometimes find developer pictures in certain campaign spots, like for instance, in some of these houses and bank buildings back on the mission Wolverine, you can see like a picture of what we think is a developer with a camel and other pictures of developers. Over on the multiplayer map Favela, if you stab this mirror for whatever reason, you can take a lot of damage or even die. And then of course, my personal favorite Modern Warfare 2 Easter egg is the teddy bears that are just hidden around the game literally everywhere. Like, I mean, we could go on the multiplayer maps and almost every multiplayer map has a teddy bear hidden somewhere. Sometimes multiple teddy bears. The campaign missions are the same way. There's teddy bears everywhere. Obviously, one of the most popular things was the one on High Rise, where if you did this really challenging jump and landed on this hanging scaffolding thing and made your way to the top of the roof, you could find a bunch of teddy bears just laying down here, because it is a secret spot, but an intentional secret spot. There were 2 DLC packs that also released with Modern Warfare 2 after Modern Warfare 2 had been out for a little bit, and they added a couple of little nods and Easter eggs as well. Like there's this pink stuffed mongoose looking thing. There was a giant teddy bear hidden in one of the maps. On the multiplayer map Bailout, there is the sign saying IW for lease, which is a reference to Infinity Ward. You can see this Captain Price graffiti, and there's also these floaty toys kind of hidden around in various places in Modern Warfare 2. I don't know if you've seen them before. They're interesting. Also, on one of the DLC maps, there's this memorial to Zakayev, which is just kind of silly, I think, but neat. Then there was a really cool museum at the end of Modern Warfare 2 where you could like look at all the set pieces from the campaign, but there was a secret button you could press and the set pieces would come to life and try to murder you. Pretty cool Easter egg. 2010 was a big year because it marked the release of the much anticipated Call of Duty Black Ops. And this time around, Treyarch went completely out there with the Easter eggs that they hid in this game. There are so many things that Call of Duty Black Ops had. It would set the pace for Call of Duty games moving forward. One of the most obvious ones and classic ones was when on the main menu of the game, if you press left and right trigger back and forth, you'd be able to break free of the harness and walk around the interrogation room in the campaign that you're normally kept in. You could even access this computer over here and look at the CIA data system. And there's a ton of various things that you can find in here, information about characters, different types of things you can activate. There's also a secret game called Zork, which was like a classic text-based adventure game that is fully programmed into this game that you can experience and like type in the commands and play Zork. Wow. This was definitely one people were talking about for quite some time back in the day. Over on the campaign level numbers, you could get a secret thunder gun, and all you had to do was like destroy some barrels, you interact with a few things, and then you go and hold up a button on the wall here, and boom, you get the thunder gun, which is cool. It's kind of like a clever secret thing hidden here, as World at War had the ray gun hidden. This time around, they hid the thunder gun in Black Ops 1. Much like Call of Duty World at War, the number 115 shows up as an Easter egg multiple times beyond just like the zombies relation. Just simple 115, which was like this number that Treyarch was kind of hiding in their games. And you can see a reference to 115 on Woods' tattoo. Also, when you're playing Search and Destroy in the multiplayer side of things, to plant the bomb, you repeatedly enter the code 115, 115, 115, so on and so forth. Also, if you load up on the multiplayer map Nuketown and you shoot off the heads of all of the mannequins within the first 15 seconds of the game, which can be pretty challenging, the song Sympathy for the Devil by the Rolling Stones will begin to play. It's a little tricky. You might need to coordinate with some friends, and the different mannequins can spawn in different locations, but it's worth doing at least once to see what it's like. There's a couple of other interesting things that they put on Nuketown, obviously. Like, for instance, this population sign goes up and down based on how many people are in the game. There's a double rainbow in the background, which is a reference to like that viral double rainbow video that was around this time. There's the mailboxes, of course, which have the names of different characters from the campaign on them, and there's even a reference to Treyarch on both the street sign and the school bus in the middle of the map as well. There's a pretty cool Wanted poster in a couple of different multiplayer maps, specifically one of the DLC maps, but you could see a Wanted sign for someone named Raphael Angelini, who was age 14 and he was wanted for pwning noobs and apparently being awesome. And then there's like a little tribute that he's loved by the developers at Treyarch, Activision Blizzard, and this was actually a tribute to a young fan who was diagnosed with leukemia, and the family visited Treyarch Studios, and the developers decided to put a little nod to him in there, which is pretty cool. Interestingly enough, if you take a closer look at some of just the random pictures that are in Call of Duty Black Ops, you can find some interesting things. Like there's a early version of the map Hotel and the map Stockpile before they were like finalized on just some pictures hanging up on the walls. Also in the campaign level where you are playing as Sergeant Reznov and you're with Dmitry Petrenko after the big betrayal happens and you're making your escape, the theme song from Call of Duty World at War plays, which is a really cool homage to World at War, as this game is the true sequel to World at War. If you load up on the multiplayer map Hazard, there's a couple of interesting references. Like for instance, there is a chocolate bar that can be seen floating in the swimming pool out of bounds, which is a reference to the movie Caddyshack. Also in certain places on the map, there's a chance that a gopher could be seen rising from the ground and then disappearing, another reference to that movie. On the map Crisis and a couple of other maps where there's like bookshelves, you can see a book that is apparently authored by Rick Tofen, one of the characters from Zombie Mode. Tank Dempsey's name can be found on ammo boxes. Over on Kowloon, if you pay attention to the TV for a couple of seconds, a 5 in a circle will appear on the screen, and then one of the dials on the number will switch to 11, and I think this is another reference to like 115. On the multiplayer map Discovery, there are multiple signs telling players to watch their head with the word Dummkopf written on it, which is German for stupid head, I think. On Zoo, this poster here actually depicts a real Soviet poster from the 1920s, which was dedicated to the first Russian animal trainer designer Nikolai Pavlovich Gladlilshevkov. On the multiplayer map Hotel, if you shoot the slot machines, they'll start spitting out money. Over on the elevator, there's actually a 3-player weight limit, so if 4 players are in the elevator and they try to use it, the doors will simply reopen after closing with a message that the maximum weight limit had been exceeded. Also, the room with the clocks in it is probably a reference to Tony Montana's mansion in Scarface, as the desk has like yellow stripes and there's TVs that act as security cameras. Hangar 18's a wild level, as the player can see like alien carcasses covered with blankets here, and they have like 4 fingers and blue feet and 4 toes sticking out from the blankets. What is going on here? On the like drive-in movie theater level, you can actually see an arcade machine called Call of Duty World at War Uber Shooter that has like the MP40 as like the gun that you would use to shoot. This is the first time World at War appeared as an arcade machine in a game, which is pretty neat. And then of course there were a ton of Easter eggs introduced in the form of zombies. That was with Call of Duty Black Ops 1. Call of Duty Black Ops 1 had some really interesting zombie related Easter eggs. Obviously on Kino der Toten there was the popular one where if you found the 3 rocks of 115 energy scattered around the map, you would play the song 115, which was possibly one of the best songs in zombie history. Also, when you were teleporting to go to the Pack-a-Punch machine, there's a chance that you'll just spawn in like a random room or Samantha's bedroom or something, and you could pick up a film reel in the short time that you're in there, and if you get all the film reels, you can play it on the big screen. It's like a little creepy movie thing here. Also, in this room, there's 4 posters on the wall of the main characters, but who's the 5th poster supposed to be? Over on the zombie map 5, there's a couple of interesting things. If you find the 3 red phones, it'll play Eminem's Won't Back Down featuring Pink, which also a cool song to fight zombies to. Over here, there's a painting on the wall of a World War II soldier. I guess it could be a picture too, or a photograph, not a painting, but World War II soldier, Sergeant Roebuck, one of the main characters from the World at War campaign. Another World at War reference here. Then on Ascension, there were a couple of different Easter eggs here. This was the first game to have like a full-on like quest line Easter egg associated with it, which we were not going to go in depth on every zombies Easter egg because they started to become like a built-in story where you're supposed to go and do these things, but we'll mention them still. Besides the 3 teddy bears that play the song Abracadaver, another great song by Elena Segman, there is a pretty big quest line where you have to do all sorts of steps to activate it. Like you have to like stand in one place and you have to do stuff with the landers, run from one place to the other. Long story short, if you fulfill the long quest line, you do get rewarded with death machines for the whole team for an extended amount of time. Shangri-La had a couple of Easter eggs as well. There's obviously the whole like story Easter egg where you have to do an eclipse and you have to stand on these platforms and you have to do all sorts of things for that one. This one was pain to do. We did all of the Easter eggs for Black Ops 1 not that long ago for a video we're working on still, so we know the struggle that many of you guys had gone through trying to get this Easter egg completed. On this map, you are looking for the secret meteorites to play the song Paradolia, and then of course on the moon level there's a secret song again, and then there's the whole Easter egg where you're supposed to shoot rockets at the Earth, and there's this weird spaceman dude that might have the name of one of your friends. Pretty cool stuff. Zombies always had cool Easter eggs and stuff built into it, and if you want a more in-depth look at just the Easter eggs of Call of Duty Black Ops, because Black Ops has so much, you should watch our 3-hour video on Call of Duty Easter eggs because that video goes hard. Nonetheless, we have a lot of games to cover besides just Call of Duty, so let's keep the ball rolling. Let's go ahead and shift gears now to 2012. Call of Duty Black Ops 2 was kind of the last Call of Duty game of this era before like the era of transitioning into the next gen would begin. Black Ops 2 definitely had a lot of really awesome things about it, and I think a lot of people look back at Call of Duty Black Ops 2 very fondly to this day. Some of you might remember there was a really cool alternate extended ending if you had like the good ending of the game where, I don't know, like Woods is just rocking out, but about 5 minutes into the performance you can actually see a zombie in the rafters on the left side of the screen. If you're playing on the multiplayer side of things and you go to the orange house in Nuketown, you head upstairs, you can see that there are these like mini figurines of the old Nuketown, which is kind of cool because the old Nuketown was one specific iconic design, and this is obviously the new, different Nuketown. Still to see a nod to where Nuketown originally came from. Also, on the multiplayer map Hijacked, if you go upstairs, you can find a book here written by Edward Richtofen, much like the ones we saw in Black Ops 1. And then over on the multiplayer map Express, you can see these movie posters on the tunnel here, and they're titled Hijacked, Meltdown, and Yemen, which are all maps from Call of Duty Black Ops 2, just kind of showing up here as a little nod. On the multiplayer map Cargo, you can see that a lot of the containers that are used for like shipping things have the text 3ARC on them, which is a reference to Treyarch, obviously. Also on Hijacked, if you look at the sides of the boat, you can see the words Von Voyage, which is a reference to David Vonderhaar, who, you know, Obviously, his nickname is like Bon here, and they made a play on the word Bon Voyage. But still, kind of a cool little thing that they hid here. If you're playing on the multiplayer map Raid, if you look in the distance from the pool area, you can actually see the multiplayer map Aftermath way out there. However, if you're playing on Aftermath and you look out of the map, you can't see the mansion from Raid. It's like a one-way Easter egg. Then over on the DLC multiplayer map Studio, you can actually see that there are some little props used that are kind of interesting, like dual-wield ray guns, sliquifiers, and the Vector K10, along with the ray gun Mark II, of course. This level also has references to Godzilla. It has like a miniature city section here, and on the map Encore, you can see a lot of London landmarks around the map, but also the drums on stage will make noise if you like knife it or shoot them. On the multiplayer map Cove, in the distance you can see a yacht that looks a lot like the yacht from the map Hijacked, and there's a couple of Castaway Easter eggs on this level as well. There's like a makeshift raft, help is written in the sand with coconuts. Some good stuff. Now, of course, Call of Duty Black Ops 2 was also notoriously known for its zombies mode, and there's a lot to unpack with zombies, so we're just gonna go through it really, really quickly to not like waste all of your time. In the tunnel on Transit, there's a green highway sign that's hanging from the roof and has a few letters blacked out. The letters that you do have left say "Day X over to me," which I think means like day crosses over to me. In the diner area, the signs that are still lit up say "Now Die" and "On for You." There is a music Easter egg hidden in this zombies map as well. By finding 3 different teddy bears, you'll be able to activate the song for this one. Then of course there is an Easter egg that is tied to the main Easter egg quest a little bit, where you go through a field and you can find the original bunker from Call of Duty World at War zombies mode, the first zombies map, and it's just kind of like recreated here briefly, and you can take a look here while you're doing your Easter egg stuff. Over on the zombie map Die Rise, there is some little Easter egg stuff on here as well. Like for instance, PhD Flopper can't be accessed on this level, though it would have been very helpful. They kind of play on this by having it visible from an elevator corridor, but it ends up remaining inaccessible. Once again, there is another song hidden in this map, which you can activate by finding 3 teddy bears scattered around the map. There is a whole Easter egg quest, much like Transit here, and multiple ways to end it, where Black Ops 2 did this thing where most of the zombie maps have 2 different ways you can conclude the Easter egg, but yeah, we're not going to go to details on all of those because those are more like quest steps rather than Easter eggs. On Mob of the Dead, at the beginning of the match, if the player stands still and doesn't revive their character, if they just chill and bleed out and not resurrect themselves in the afterlife, the song Samantha's Lullaby can be heard. There is a little jump scare that appears if you have a sniper rifle and you're looking at the fireworks on the prison roof. Then there's a number pad over here that has a couple of different Easter eggs that you can do with it. If you put the numbers 935 in it, it'll activate "Where Are We Going?" And if you input 115 in it, you can hear the enemy zombie thing Brutus say "Not this time," or maybe "Next time." And then he changes the numbers to 666. If you find 3 whiskey bottles around the map, the song Rusty Cage by Johnny Cash will play. And much like how Die Rise teased us with PhD Flopper, this time on an inaccessible dock, we can see PhD Flopper and Mule Kick, both being unavailable through here, though you can get those perks elsewhere in the cell block. Then if you look over to the clock in the cafeteria, it's listed as 115, which is 115. On Buried, there's 3 teddy bears again that you can activate to try to get music to play. If you get a ballistic knife and you go inside of the saloon and shoot a bullseye with it, the piano behind the player will start to play all by itself. A little spooky, but also kind of cool. If the player goes through the mansion again to leave the maze, a ghost can be seen playing the piano, and then you can tip the ghost 10 points and he'll give the player a random perk. And then over on Origins, there are radios scattered around on this map. If you hold them down, you'll get the song Shepherd of Fire. There is another jump scare here where if you zoom in on the burning church, you'll get a picture of a skull and a scream, kind of like what you had in Mob of the Dead. Like we mentioned earlier with the whole Call of Duty section, there are a lot of games that were on both the PlayStation 3 and the Xbox 360 and helped define this generation as a whole. So it'd feel weird not at least mentioning them in the PlayStation 3 video. So as we go into the third-party territory, if you've watched our Xbox video, there might be a little bit of double dip. We apologize, but trust us, it's some really cool stuff. It's worth watching. One of the biggest and best Easter eggs to come from Grand Theft Auto 4 was probably the Statue of Happiness, which is a play on the Statue of Liberty, but kind of resembles Hillary Clinton. I don't know. She also, instead of having a torch, has a hot coffee, which is likely a reference to the hot coffee controversy from Grand Theft Auto San Andreas, one that, mind you, caused then US Senator Hillary Clinton to launch an FTC investigation into the hot coffee mod. So in a way, this was like Rockstar's little like jab at that whole controversy. There's also a sign that says no hidden content this way, which is a reference in itself actually to an Easter egg from Grand Theft Auto San Andreas. But if you head inside of the Statue of Happiness and you climb up a ladder, you can actually find a beating heart inside of the statue. That's insane. GTA 4 also had a lot of references to other games just that have existed. Like, I mean, there's the TV show Republican Space Rangers, which is a play on Halo, something that would be used again in Grand Theft Auto 5, actually. There's a random pedestrian that resembles Jimmy Hopkins, the character from the Bully game. He does look a little older here. If you go to the amusement park in Broker, there's blue and purple hippo statues. This is a reference to the Manhunt series. And then there's a little reference at the beginning of the mission Clean Getaway. Vlad nearly gets hit by a taxi and shouts the iconic line,
I'm walking here!
Which is actually a reference to the movie Midnight Cowboy.
I'm walking here! I'm walking here!
Something I didn't know until I looked into this on the GTA fandom wiki.
Also, another banger game was Batman Arkham Asylum. And with it being a Batman game, there's obviously a ton of Easter eggs and references to various parts of the DC universe. The first one you can find if you enter Harley Quinn's office, where you can see a bunch of newspaper cutouts and pictures of the Joker and even her original costume, or at least parts of the original costume. And if you look closer at some of the newspaper clippings, you can actually see stuff like the Injustice Gang Strikes Again, which played a bigger part in the Justice League comics in like the 70s, so this is like an old school throwback. If you are on your way to Dr. Young's office, you can find this morgue, and one of the corpses will have a little tag on them saying Ra's al Ghul. Now if you actually come back to this area later in the game, the body is gone, meaning, you know, someone took the body, or maybe, you know, Ra's al Ghul woke up, which makes sense because he would play a major part in Batman Arkham City. Also, while obviously not every Batman villain can be in one game, there is still a couple cells that reference different Batman villains from over the years. You can find the cell of Calendar Man, which has a bunch of those little rip-off calendar notes all over the wall in the cell. You can find the cell of Maxi Zeus, who has like a bunch of Greek mythology drawings on the wall. Also, a little later on, you're able to find Scarecrow's secret lair. If you've ever seen the weird Batman movie with Arnold Schwarzenegger as Mr. Freeze or Dr. Freeze or whatever, you might remember that George Clooney was the one playing Batman. And there's actually a little reference to this. On one of those LED message boards, you can actually see that one of the doctors is called Dr. Clooney. Another similar reference is made to Cillian Murphy, who played Scarecrow in the Christopher Nolan Batman movies. During one of the interrogation or interview tapes with Scarecrow in the game, he actually mentions a Dr. Murphy. It also references the voice actor that played Scarecrow in the new Batman Adventures, Jeffrey Combs, when they talk about a Dr. Combs as well. Now, actually, when the game released, Rocksteady hid a secret room that would hint at the sequel, Arkham City. Though actually nobody was able to find it, and a year after the game's release, Rocksteady themselves revealed that they had hidden the secret room. In the warden's office, you can blow up one of the walls and it'll lead to the secret room that has blueprints of Arkham City and other little concept art. Damn, this could have been a Rocket Stuff video if this was like some undiscovered stuff that happened nowadays. Now, Batman Arkham City has a lot of cool Easter eggs in it as well. If you pull out your cryptographic sequencer and you hold down all the triggers and all the bumpers and rotate the left thumbstick to the left and the right thumbstick to the right, eventually you will activate Big Head mode, which gives everyone in the game big heads, including Batman or any enemies he encounters. I think it's funny, and I mean, Big Head mode is one of those classic Easter eggs that has been in a lot of different games over the years, so it's cool to see it in Batman Arkham City as well. Also, you can find another of Scarecrow's secret layers if you hack this hatch on a boat, and if you go down there you'll see like a couple things, like a bunch of insect habitats or something like that, and also a dead guy on a chair. You can have a brief encounter with Killer Croc, that's a little Easter egg, and I remember finding this one when I played this game when it came out, and I was so confused because you have this whole dialogue with him and then he never shows up in the story again, so I guess I didn't realize this was an Easter egg back then. But nonetheless, you throw your Batarang at this button and then this cutscene will start playing.
You are not welcome here.
I'm not here to fight you, Croc. Let me pass.
Your scent is different. I smell death on you. I don't need to fight you, Batman. I just need to wait, and then I will feed on your corpse.
Also, if you beat the game, you can go back to Joker's funhouse and find a pregnancy test that is positive in Joker's old office. During the end credits, Harley Quinn is singing a lullaby, so all this hints at Harley Quinn being pregnant.
Hush, little baby, don't say
But then if you play through the DLC Harley Quinn's Revenge, you can actually find a bunch of negative pregnancy tests. So I don't know, is she pregnant or not? I guess they left it open. At the beginning, when you're playing as Bruce Wayne and you're being led through like the intake of the prison, you can actually see 3 different Batman characters. You can see Black Mask trying to fight back against some guards early on. Then you will also have a brief encounter with Deadshot. And also if you look at the rooftops after you fight the first set of inmates, you can see Azrael just standing there and observing everything. Also in the museum gladiator pit, you can find this room that has a puddle in it. And in the reflection, you can see like the skyline of a city. Now, you know, people have speculated what this is, if this is the next location or if it's Metropolis. But I think it's just Gotham and might even be like a texture that is just there on accident. But nonetheless, a lot of people considered this an Easter egg back in the day. Also using the cryptographic sequencer, you can search a bunch of radio waves that will have secret messages when decoded. Now these are decoded by a very basic cipher where AS1, BS2, CS3 and so on and so forth. And if you decode the numbers, you can get these messages. You will pay for what you have done to me. I will return, Batman. And fear will tear Gotham City to shreds. The last one is actually decoded using the keyword Scarecrow, so this one might hint at Scarecrow's plans. There's actually another Easter egg that went undiscovered for 3 years after the game's release. And it was hinted at by some random YouTube channel, and people speculate that was Rocksteady who did this. But anyways, if you change your internal clock on whatever you're playing on to December 13th, 2004, which is when Rocksteady was founded, and then you visit Calendarman, he'll have some special dialogue.
Do you remember my early work? Flawed, but it showed promise. Just like you. As your skills improved, I perfected mine. Starting with seasons and moving through the weeks, I became stronger. My work more elaborate. Days were the secret, Batman. And the end of days is coming. I was there at your beginning, and I will be there at your end.
In Fallout 3, there's this room that just has a whole lot of plungers in it for some reason. I mean, this isn't the only thing that's come out of Fallout 3. There are other Easter eggs, like the existence of these gnomes that keep popping up in Bethesda games. Also, if you head off the coast of Point Lookout, you can find this mysterious shipwreck callld the Ozymandias, which is probably a reference to the phrase Ozymandias, which is like a metaphor for like power deteriorating things. Could be commentary on like the overall socio-economic commentary hidden in Fallout 3, or just like a clever reference to something else. You might have run into the character Harold in the campaign. He's like a tree, I guess. I guess now he's a tree. Nonetheless, this is actually a recurring character who's shown up in the first 2 Fallout games, and it's cool that after Bethesda took over the franchise, they continued this ongoing trend and kept it in Fallout 3. In Fallout New Vegas, there's a lot of references to different movies, like just a ton. If you're interested in like movie stuff, definitely check out like the Fallout wiki on New Vegas because there's so much. But some interesting ones include like the Fight Club reference where there's a challenge called Destroy Something Not So Beautiful, which is a reference to the Fight Club line. There's this whole like plot line in Fallout New Vegas where Mr. New Vegas himself will talk about sightings of something coming out of Lake Mead, and that they're calling it like the Lake Mead Monster, which is a play on like the Loch Ness Monster.
Howdy folks, it's Mr. New Vegas, and I have a good feeling about all of you listening. I've got news for you. Witnesses report a huge object or creature surfacing in Lake Mead. So far, photos of the so-called Lake Mead monster are grainy and underexposed.
And then in Old World Blues, there's this trait called Logan's Loophole, which is a reference to the 1976 film Logan's Run, which is a crazy movie. It's like about this society where you get to like live the best life that you could ever imagine until the age of 30, where you then get like sacrificed to be reincarnated. But for whatever reason, when people reach the age they're supposed to be reincarnated, some of them start to run. And it's up to this time cop to go undercover and stop these people. I mean, he's not really a time cop, an age cop. But then when they age him up to like, you know, get him on the inside, he starts being like, wait a second, what does that mean for me? And then, spoiler alert, he runs. It's called Logan's Run. One of my favorite movies from the 70s. Another great game was Oblivion from the Elder Scrolls series. And there's this one character who's shown up in a couple of different Elder Scrolls games at this point named Maik the Liar. And his dialogue is always so interesting because while his name is the Liar, oftentimes the things that he is saying is actually truthful, almost breaking the fourth wall sometimes and like talking about the game itself and other types of things. A lot of inside jokes to things that have happened in the series, and ultimately he's just a pretty neat character.
Mike believes the children are our future, but he doesn't want them ruining all of our fun. Some people want special bows that take too long to load and need special arrows called bolts. Mike thinks they are idiots.
He also does show up in Skyrim as well, once again, so we can maybe hope that he appears in the Elder Scrolls 6 one day into the future, but yeah, here he is in Skyrim.
Maik saw a mud crab the other day. Horrible creatures. Too much magic can be dangerous. Maik once had 2 spells and burned his sweet roll.
Also, over in Oblivion, you can find this small bridge past the mouth of Panther, and underneath the bridge, you'll find the remains of a dead troll, which I think is like reminiscent of like the children's fairy tale. There's a poorly scrawled note on the body that is kind of funny. It says, "Me worst troll ever. Nobody pay bridge toll. Me not scary enough. Me get drunk and kill self troll drown." Whatever that means. R.I.P. the dead troll who couldn't get people to pay the bridge toll. If you look at the posters for the arena in the Imperial City, you can actually see that they are reminiscent to the box art from the original Elder Scrolls Arena game. And yeah, Oblivion really was a gem for its time. Over in Skyrim, there are some other interesting Easter eggs as well. Like, for instance, there's a headless horseman that you can just randomly have a chance of encountering if you're near like one of the main roads while at night. If you follow him long enough, he'll take you over to Hamvir's Rest, and then there's like several skeletons and like this dude you have to fight, and once you fight them all, you get access to a master chest. There is an item known as the Notched Pickaxe, which might be a reference to Minecraft, as the creator of Minecraft's name was Notch, and you use a pickaxe for mining and whatnot, so it's likely that this Notched Pickaxe was named after him. If you go into Endon's house in Markhearth, you can actually see that this back here, all of these items are arranged to maybe look like Pac-Man. Also, circling back to that Troll Bridge Easter egg from Oblivion, there's a similar one over by Hag Rock Redoubt, and there's a bridge with a dead troll underneath. If it's your first time visiting, you'll see 2 goats meeting up with a 3rd goat at the end of the bridge and then running off together. The Bioshock series, interestingly enough, has quite a few Easter eggs, though the first game doesn't have as many Easter eggs as later entries. Though in that first game, if you go to the farmer's market, you can see on the table here what resembles Pac-Man, kind of like inscribed in the wood here. Kind of a clever little reference to that game. There also was an Easter egg that wasn't uncovered until 2018, pretty much 10 years after the game initially released. But if you turn on art captions in the settings, you can actually see a developer message hidden away about Paul Hellquist not doing his job, because there was a debug text message towards him secretly as an Easter egg hidden in the game from where you first encounter Ryan in person, and you can see this little funny nod Easter egg to probably someone's coworker, which is hilarious. Bioshock 2 had some interesting Easter eggs along the way too, like there was the plane wreckage that you can just barely see in the beginning parts of the campaign for Bioshock 2. Then also in Bioshock 2, you can see wrenches scattered throughout the campaign, which is not only a reference to Ken Levine's first big video game project that he worked on with Irrational Games, but the wrench was the Bioshock weapon, essentially, for the main character in the first game. So all the wrenches scattered around in Bioshock 2 is kind of a nod to that, and this is a trend that will continue into Bioshock Infinite with more wrenches just being everywhere. Another interesting thing is that all Bioshock games utilize a secret code somewhere in the game, usually a key code with the numbers 0451, which is a reference to the book Fahrenheit 451. Bioshock Infinite has some great Easter eggs as well, like for instance, if you head to this section of the game, there's references to the game's own developmental delays that they went through. Elizabeth will be ecstatic when she sees a certain mechanical game called Duke and Dimwit, and mentions that the newest one in the series had been delayed 3 times, much like how Bioshock Infinite dealt with 3 delays. Also in Bioshock Infinite, there's this like cutscene moment where Booker and Elizabeth get teleported inside a rapture, and you can distantly, way out there in the background, see what appears to be a big daddy that's lifeless and like a little sister mourning over him. There was like a trend with Bioshock where sometimes baby carriages would have weapons inside of them, which was kind of clever. Also in Bioshock Infinite, in some areas, like what we have here in the Fraternal Order, if you listen to the ambient noise, it sounds, I don't know, kind of like ominous or something. But some players found that if you speed up the song between 800 to 1000%, you can actually hear that it's somewhat of a normal song with singing and acoustic guitar being hearable here. Take a listen to this. If you play Battlefield 3, you might have come across this interesting memorial here on Wake Island. It's just like an homage to the fact that Wake Island's appeared in so many Battlefield games. It's like a thank you to the players. Also, if you've played on the Battlefield 3 map Epicenter, it was a part of the Aftermath DLC, you can find the helmet from Isaac Clarke from the Dead Space series, or Dead Space 2 specifically, on the shelves in this small room over here. There's even some little like sound effects that go with it. Over on the map Danya Fortress, another DLC map, there's a small model of the Normandy SR2 from the Mass Effect series chilling here. Then also on that Aftermath map that we talked about, if you take a helicopter over to a building near the C marker on Conquest mode, you can find running shoes here on this building. This is probably a reference to Faith Connor from the Mirror's Edge series. And then apparently there's a chance that on the map Nebanon Flats, there's a pterodactyl that can occasionally spawn in and you can see it fly by.
Here is the screenshots right here. Look at that pretty beast. Look at it. Oh my god, Das.
This isn't the only Battlefield game that has some clever references. If you played Battlefield Bad Company 2 and you're like paying close attention to some of the little like radio chatter that happens in the background that a lot of the time your brain just kind of turns off, you don't pay attention to, you could hear one of the like people on the radio saying, "Find a bad guy, I'll get you ice cream for dinner." Also on the mission Cold War, you can see another little Mirror's Edge reference here in the background. There's a picture of someone. I'm pretty sure it's Faith again. There's some other little like clever jabs, you know, making fun of heartbeat monitors from the Modern Warfare 2 series and whatnot.
He'll just send some special ops douchebags with heartbeat monitors on their guns instead of us.
Also, there's a sandcastle that first appeared in Battlefield 1943 that was brought back for Battlefield Bad Company 2.
Now, when it comes to the first Dead Space game from 2008 and the two follow-up games, there's a handful of cool Easter eggs I thought we should include in this video. The very first one that came to mind for me was when you can actually see Isaac's face at the beginning of the first game, before he ends up putting on his helmet for the rest of the game. Also, you can find Schofield tools all over the game. Glenn Schofield was the executive producer of Dead Space 1. In the captain's chair, you can find this log that has a bunch of names in it, and all these names are developers that worked on the game. In Dead Space 2, you can find more developers hidden in the observation room, where there's the faces of the UI designers on these test subject screens. Then the main menu had all these secret messages that were written in like the marker language or whatever you call this. I don't actually know the name for this. If you decode these messages, they would say stuff like, "You can't stop what's coming, make us whole," or even stuff like, "Welcome back, Nicole Brennan," which is obviously Isaac's deceased girlfriend. Also in Chapter 5, if you die during the Tormentor fight, you can actually see a hand floating in space, and this looks just like the Dead Space 1 cover. Also, there's an advertisement for Skate 3000, which I guess we're getting Skate 4 soon, so I guess we still have a couple to go before we get to 3000. And then in Dead Space 3, if you take the first letter of each of the chapter's names, it spells out "Brother, Moons Are Awake," which actually teased the plot of the Dead Space 3 DLC Awakened. This wasn't the first time they did this though, because in Dead Space 1, if you take all the first letters of the chapters, it spells out "Nicole is dead."
Also in Saints Row 3, there are some interesting Easter egg references to wrestling. Like there's the emote Nature Boy and Woo Scream, reference to Ric Flair, the Marine, a reference to John Cena, Angel Mania, a reference to Hulk Hogan, and Cutthroat, a reference to Chris Benoit. If you go to any container ship, you can find this like little penguin at the back of the ship that's been impaled. Yeah. There's a few clever references to that number 31 in Saints Row the Third as well. The code for the elevator in Party Time is 3131.
Code's 3131. Just watch the jacket.
There's that whole like text adventure mission in Dragons and Tears, and there's like this whole little section that mentions praying to the 31 gods of Diaz. There's also like this background event going on called Murder Brawl 31, which kind of like a reference like I guess the Super Bowl, but 31. numbers here. Also, Saints Row 3 does have a couple interesting things hidden around Kinsey's warehouse crib. It's worth taking a look at if you're just like playing the game and you want to look at some stuff closer. Like for instance, there's a newspaper clipping of a hidden bunny in the ocean, which is a reference to that giant rabbit that we saw in Saints Row 2. Well, it turns out this was referenced again in Saints Row the Third, where if you go to this specific shipping dock area, you climb on there, you can see that this giant ship has the rabbit on it, covered in net, like they finally caught it and found it and brought it here. Yeah, I don't know. Really interesting though. I love this. I love that they kind of kept a little bit of continuity with an Easter egg across two games. Okay, then do you guys remember the infamous or famous keyboard cat videos from back in the day? Well, here in one of the cribs, you can actually see a computer playing keyboard gat, like the character Johnny Gat, but he's a cat playing the keyboard. Very cool, Volition. I see you. Do you remember that cool level in Saints Row 4 where you like go back into the 60s and then you get like the dubstep gun and things get a little wild? There is a clever homage in this level though when you walk down the stairs where it says "Leave It to the Saints," which is a reference to the TV series based in the 60s called Leave It to Beaver. I remember vaguely watching a couple of reruns of the show back in the day when I was younger, and then that weird like late 90s, early 2000s adaptation that was a weird movie. For some reason, I have that memory stuck in my head. Also, once again, in Saints Row 4, there are more references to the number 31 popping up in a couple of different instances. We learned that virtual steel port is known as Simulation 31.
Wear your fealty, and I will empower you to be wardens of Simulation 31. You will have one purpose: torment the President of the United States.
There's a scene where Shondi's talking about driving down the freeway with Matt Miller on the roof of the car, going 131 miles an hour.
Who would have thought, eh? You and me fighting side by side.
Certainly not me.
But it's good. Your brawn and my brains, your sass and my good looks. We're like a buddy cop show.
The one where the pissed off ex-gang member gets a dog for a partner, so she straps it to the roof of the cop car and drives down the freeway at 131 miles per hour?
That's not a real show.
Zinyak even refers to the player as Special Prisoner 31, so we see more of these little references popping up.
All soldiers on high alert. Special Prisoner 31 has escaped and is moving through the base. This is a kill order. Repeat, kill order.
Much like in the other Saints Row games, there's also a couple of inflatable toys you might find in Saints Row 4 in one way or another. Also, Saints Row 4 has a developer room that is pretty cool. It's a little secret area you can look around in, and that's neat. If you shoot off the developers' heads, some fireworks will go off inside of the basement, which is funny. Now, some of you may remember the 2011 game Rage, and some of you might remember that in the TV show Breaking Bad, Jesse plays Rage, but with a light gun. Yeah, I don't know what's going on here. But in the game itself, if you go to the shelf in Sheriff Black's office, you can find Tuco's grill from Breaking Bad, which is a reference to Hank keeping the grill as like a trophy. This Easter egg actually has another little layer to it when you realize that the voice actor who voices Gabe is Matt Jones, who voiced Badger on Breaking Bad. Also in Rage, if you head to the abandoned distillery, you can find this graffiti room that has a ton of references to the developers at id Software who worked on this game. Pretty cool. There are also a ton of references to Doom literally all over the place in this game, so if you're a big Doom fan and you like Easter eggs, this might be a game to spend more time on. Also, on Mayor Clayton's desk, you can find the bobblehead of the Vault Boy from the Fallout series, which is neat. And on the Quest Defibrillator upgrade, there is this little reference to Duke Nukem here with the woman that gets captured by the aliens. And there's also two references to Lost hidden away in this game as well. In Wasted Garage's second floor, there's a street sign that has the numbers from Lost, 4, 8, 15, 16, 23, 42. Also in that dev graffiti room we talked about earlier, you can find signage for Not Penny's boat, a reference to the Not Penny's boat scene from Lost. Also hidden away in Rage with a couple of steps you have to go through, there are Easter eggs with secret rooms that reference Wolfenstein, Quake, and Doom. Red Dead Redemption has some funny things happening in some of the cemetery sites. For instance, if you go to Coots Chapel, you can find a gravestone that has the label a cowboy without a name, which is a reference to Clint Eastwood's Man with No Name. Next time you play Red Dead Redemption, pay attention to the cemetery and grave markers. There's always a lot of little Easter eggs here. There's another thing over by Blackwater Chapel where you can see inscribed here the phrase, "Wake me if something interesting happens," which is likely a reference to the Halo series where at the end of Halo 3, Master Chief utters the line, "Wake me when you need me." There's also a pretty clever reference to Shawshank Redemption over in this area. If you look in Beecher's Hope, you can find this like lone tree with like a little rock wall and stuff. And this is an homage to the movie Shawshank Redemption where Morgan Freeman's character Red finds like the secret treasure. Also, sometimes John Marston, if he's attacked by like a wild animal, he'll say something along the lines of "Game over, man, game over," which is a line directly from the movie Aliens. So it's kind of like a double inside joke here. Over in Red Dead Redemption's expansion, Undead Nightmare, there's actually some cool things going on here. Like there's this homage to the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. You can actually see all 4 of the horses: war, pestilence, famine, and death. If you go on and complete all of the undead hunter challenges, and you also catch all 4 of these horses, you can actually unlock a straight up unicorn in Undead Nightmare, which is insane. And now, one of the biggest releases of all time, Grand Theft Auto 5. It's crazy to think that this game released in 2013. A lot of us know that if you go to the water in the very first level of the game, there's this frozen alien that you can see there, and it's kind of creepy. It's one of those big ones that were such a big deal back when this game first came out. Bigfoot is like this mystery across Los Santos and the larger San Andreas area, and in one instance in the campaign, you can actually find him, and it's some dude in a suit, but then the other instance of him is potentially real. Like, we might have a real encounter with Bigfoot here, which is kind of crazy. You can find a character that highly resembles Master Chief at the Walk of Fame, though he seems a little bit scuffed, to tell you the truth. If you head to the northernmost point of the map and go underwater quite a bit, you can find this, what appears to be a sunken UFO, which is wild. If you're playing on the story mode of GTA 5 and you head to Sonora National Park and you look at this rock here, you can see a poem that might be written by a serial killer. And then, of course, if you head to the very top of Mount Gordo at night between 11 and 12, you could see a creepy but ghostly apparition of Jock Cranley's wife, which is super spooky. If you go inside a gas station, you can look at some of the magazines and they can be a little wild. Like, this gas station has a magazine called Alien Prober 3 and it says, "Watch your back." There's even this anime magazine. If you pull up your phone and you dial 948-555-0100, the dial-up modem sound can randomly be heard. This would actually be the number you would call for ZIT in GTA 4, where the same thing could happen. Also, if you go see a movie, you may notice that some of the locations in the movies and the character models are taken directly from Grand Theft Auto 4 and Red Dead Redemption, Rockstar's other franchise. Also, in Sandy Shores, you can go to this bar and there's references literally everywhere. Some of these can be found in other places, but if you're trying to see all of them in just like one place, this is a great location to go because they're just all over the place here. You can see this poster for a lost dog, which I'm pretty sure is a wolf. Someone made a whole ad about a dog that they found just to reveal that the dog's dead. Someone else lost a turtle. I'm not really too sure what this ad is supposed to mean. And it's also concerning that someone out there is missing their lost chicken. We can only hope that they can find it. There's this ad for exotic dancing lessons. Someone needs a roommate who apparently needs to be a female and a vegan. If you look over here, you can actually see a newspaper, and on the front of the newspaper, it's Johnny Klebitz, who's the main character from GTA 4, The Lost and the Damned, but also is that minor character at the beginning of the GTA 5 campaign on Trevor's side of things. Then there's this little piece of paper that says Narwhal Bacon, which is like a saying on Reddit from like 10 years ago. It was like a clever inside joke back then. Now it's a little dated, but still, it's interesting to see it here. Then there's this poster to fix your accent, this one for a lost cat, and for all of you out there who need a new job, there's a job opportunity here. If you go inside the bar, you can see a picture of a guy doing something with a tire. Behind the counter, there are these $69 bills with a picture from Grand Theft Auto San Andreas, which is a really clever reference here. There's a picture of this guy from the Altruist Camp. Then you can see Nico Bellic in a tow truck, but this is interesting because this tow truck was only only featured in the Lost and the Damned expansion, and you can't play as Nico in the Lost and the Damned, so this is like some rare picture. Okay, so this next one's kind of weird. I was driving down Eclipse Boulevard in single-player campaign, and I noticed there was like a crowd of people over by the hardcore comic store. I decided to stop and see what it was, and there was a ton of people surrounding a superhero? I don't know. It's apparently the character Impotent Rage, but I think it's just a guy in a suit cosplaying as the character or something, but he didn't seem too happy about it. He was pretty miserable, actually.
Accelerate! I'm going mad here!
Give me a flare.
Right! I'm calling the cops! I want to be doing Shakespeare and I'm stuck doing this crap!
Also, there's a lot of other stores that you can sometimes come across that have very interesting names or brands that are plays on other brands. You could probably name a ton just by thinking about Grand Theft Auto, but there were some more interesting ones that I just wanted to point out as well. This one was Fruit of the Vine Merchants, which obviously is a play on the real-world brand Fruit of the Loom. I also found this advertisement for what appears to be the in-world version of an iPhone, which now is the iFruit 9iX. So we know that the brand is getting up there in models. Either way, this one was 3% thinner, 3% faster, and a 30-hour queue. If you go outside of the Weasel Dorset Theater, there's actually this writing on the wall that says no crying zone. One of the most popular stores that you can't actually go into but would be like a main store if you could go into it in downtown Los Santos is the Anna Rex store. Also, while I'm at it, I wanted to point out that the logo for the Wenger Institute is a little interesting, to say the least. I don't know what they were going for with this W design, but yeah. Okay, so some of you may be familiar with the E-Cola soda drink that's all over the place. They also do the Sprunk Sprite type of play on soda for Sprite, but the E-Cola one is actually really clever, and I never really thought about it until just now. But yeah, first of all, the drink is E-Cola, which sounds like E. coli, but then they took things a step further and added the motto of it being deliciously infectious, which is clever because E. coli can cause like a bacterial infection, or it is a bacterial infection. I don't really remember too much from biology. Nonetheless, it's funny that this is like the Coca-Cola soda equivalent in the Grand Theft Auto universe. Also, while I was examining some other locations, I found a store that gave us a little bit more information about some of the weird things we've seen earlier on, like the Halo knockoff is actually a series called Republican Space Rangers, which sounds amazing. And remember that anime character that we saw at the gas station earlier? Well, we see a better and clearer advertisement for that called Princess Robot Bubblegum. In the single player campaign, you can take the submersible deep down in the water to a certain area, and you can actually find this strange underwater hatch, which is a reference to the TV show Lost. If you do manage to get close enough, you can hear some knocking, which in Morse code apparently translates to, "Hey, you never call, how'd you fancy going bowling?" which is a reference to one of the greatest characters in Grand Theft Auto history, GTA 4's Roman Bellic. If you go to Power Street and you head to the lower level, there's a ton of graffiti on the wall back here, but if you look over on the left, you can see this Los Santos spray paint, which is actually mirrored in the style of the original Grand Theft Auto logo from when the franchise first started. You can get this outfit that actually resembles Tommy from Grand Theft Auto Vice City. On Vespucci Beach, you can actually find some towels that say I Heart VC, which is likely a reference to Vice City as well. Does anyone else remember the character BJ Smith? He was actually a minor character in Grand Theft Auto Vice City, but there's a few locations named after him across San Andreas, like this rec center. If you go to the mask store at Vespucci Beach, one of the masks resembles Pigsy from Manhunt, another game that had been developed by Rockstar, and in GTA Online, they added even more skins that are references to other Manhunt-looking characters. Occasionally, when you're driving on the freeway, you may see signs leading to the Elysian Field Freeway, and this is actually a really subtle but clever reference to another Rockstar title, LA Noire. In LA Noire, there is a company known as Elysian Fields Development, so the fact that we get an Elysian Fields here as well is pretty cool. There's a TV commercial that you can watch for Up and Atom Burger, which is a burger shop you can find in Los Santos, probably inspired by In-N-Out Burger, but the TV commercials themselves themselves actually use images from the game LA Noire as well. During the mission, the Polito score, Michael will actually mention that his very first score was a heist on the outskirts of Carcer City in 1988. This is a reference to Manhunt, as Manhunt takes place in Carcer City. Over at the Suburban shop, Michael can buy an outfit similar to the one Max Payne wears in Max Payne 3. If you look at the boat, the Dignity, it actually is almost an exact replica to the same boat present in the mission Suntan Oil, Stale Margaritas, and Greed from Max Payne 3. There's two different cafes across Los Santos named Cafe Redemption, which may be a reference to Red Dead Redemption. In the campaign, on the level where you take Jimmy to ride bikes at the beach, you can find a guy working at the bike rental shop, and if you look closely at the shirt he's wearing, it's a reference to John Marston, the character from Red Dead, and he's also featured in Red Dead Redemption 2. You can find this ring cleaning shop called Supersonic, and it's funny because their whole color scheme is blue and they have a ring, a very clear reference to Sonic the Hedgehog, but in a simple and subtle way. If you go all the way out to Blaine County, there's this diner that has a giant purple dinosaur. Surely that can't be a reference to Barney the dinosaur, could it? If you go inside of Lester's house, there's a book called Surveillance on the bookshelf, and if you look at the front cover of it, there's a picture of CJ from Grand Theft Auto San Andreas on it. Franklin has an interesting book in his house as well, a Red Dead Redemption based book. If you head over to the Richmond neighborhood, you can find this giant mansion, which is supposed to be inspired by the real world Playboy mansion, and if you look at these two side by side, yeah, it looks pretty similar. It seems like Rockstar Games really loved hiding a couple of Back to the Future references across all of Grand Theft Auto 5. For instance, in Lester's house, there's an 88 miles per hour sticker. All electric boxes in Grand Theft Auto have a notice saying 1.21 GW, which stands for 1.21 gigawatts. And then if you head over to the cemetery, you can find the little chapel in the front is named Hill Valley Church, which is Marty's hometown from the movies. This one's maybe not as much of an Easter egg, but something that was really clever and on the nose, but in the campaign, and also you can find it around GTA Online, there is an Aston Martin that you can drive, and it's called a JB007, and on the deep inside mission, you even get to drive this vehicle and use some of the trap contraptions that are known from the older James Bond films. It's actually really clever. If you head up to the Mount Chiliad State Wilderness, you can find this small dirt road that leads to a clearing that has 4 cars, and then there's these dead bodies around the cars, and even a briefcase containing $25,000 at the bottom of the hill past the cars. This is all a reference to the movie No Country for Old Men. If you head into Vinewood, you can find the Vinewood Walk of Fame, where all of these stars with celebrities from the Grand Theft Auto universe will be located. Now, there's a lot of characters that show up and have their names from Grand Theft Auto 5 and even older Grand Theft Auto games, and it's pretty cool to see a little reference and homage to them here. But one interesting one that definitely stands out, of course, is Mad Dog, who did in fact get his own star on the Walk of Fame, who is a main character in Grand Theft Auto San Andreas. That's actually not the only time you'll see Mad Dog referenced across Grand Theft Auto 5. There's a few other places where his music is referenced, and it's kind of cool to see what some of these characters might be up to all these years later. There's also references to a band called Love Fist, which was a band that had been featured in other games like Grand Theft Auto Vice City. Did you ever notice that some of like the lawn care type vehicles are manufactured by a brand called Jack Sheep? It's an obvious parody of the real world brand John Deere. There's this company for liposuction called Fat Losers Liposuction with the motto, "We'll make you half the person you were." There's Germinator Plants and Gardens with this little logo plant that says "I'll be Bark," and it has like sunglasses as if it's from the Terminator movies. If you're in Vespucci Beach and you head over to this little restaurant called Shark Bites, you can see that on the menu there's something called "Ain't Much Room Left." I didn't know what that meant at first, but then I realized it's a play on the phrase "ain't got much room left." Get it? Ain't much room left? No? Okay. Also, there's some other interesting things at some of these booths in that same area. Like, for instance, this jewelry store might not actually be a jewelry store. I don't know, I just have that hunch. When I went to the bike shop, I noticed that that the person working at the bike counter isn't always just sitting in the chair. Sometimes he's just standing in the ground. Down the road, there's this restaurant called Nut Buster where you can hit the nuts. And then after finding all of these, we decided to set our attention maybe downtown to find some other interesting, nuanced things. There's a billboard poster for a legal team, Hammerstein and Faust, and it seems like they really may know employment law well. You'll never need to work again. Your boss is a thief, a bully, and a crook, and he expects you to work. That's like slavery. Also, there's this location that exists. I found this laser printing store that was interestingly closed down, and there was a sign on the front of it that's essentially saying that they can't guarantee their employees' salaries this month. Good luck explaining that to labor and industries. Maybe they should hit up Hammerstein and Faust, since they seem to know employment law so well. There's this meat house called Spit Roasters. We found a movie poster for the film Die Already 4, probably a reference to the Die Hard movie series. And then there's the Grand Theft Auto in-universe version of Ripley's Believe It or Not, those like museum novelty type locations, but in this universe it's called Bishop WTF. They seem to have some interesting attractions though on the windows, which kind of make me wish we could go in there. You know the candy bar Ego Chasers, or health bar Ego Chasers? Did you know they have apparently 20,000 calories in one of those? That's insane. Also, while we're talking about interesting brands we've seen in the Grand Theft Auto universe, there's this one that might be EDP's, and this one that might be Howie Mandel's brand. We also found this little restaurant shop, it seemed interestingly enough, and they seem to offer a fried chocolate bar burger that may or may not contain meat. I don't know what that is. And then also, Huda Man, this Shoota Man. Okay. And next, let's look to Star Wars The Force Unleashed, because there are a couple of interesting Easter eggs here. Like, for instance, in the TIE Fighter factory, you can find a Republic Commandos helmet, a good nod to that game series. In the Empirical, if you go into the research room, you can actually find a hidden number 1138, another reference to George Lucas's movies, where this number gets hidden a lot of the time. It's just here on the wall next to the door. In the Imperial Kashyyyk room, there's a trophy room here, and is that Jar Jar Binks just frozen here? I mean, it could just be any Gungan, I guess, but hey, I like this little homage or Easter egg that they slid in here. Also, while in this video we didn't focus too much on cheat codes and stuff like this game did have a long list of different cheat codes you could type in and unlock some interesting things, which is always neat in a game like this when it's like a single player sword slashing lightsaber type game, because look, all of a sudden you can just max out your force combos or gain the ability to Sith throw anyone. A lot of options out there. Do some of you guys remember Guitar Hero 3? The era of Through the Fire and Flames was crazy. There's a lot of musical references across all of Guitar Hero, so we can't go into every single one, but a couple of interesting gaming related ones. For instance, if you look at the Kaiju Megadome, you can find an ad for Neversoft in the background. There's also a lot of references to the number 999, which is another reference to Neversoft for some reason. It was like their go-to number for hiding things around. So you might see 999 appear from time to time, like Studio 999. In Guitar Hero World Tour, there's a little reference here to the band Nirvana, where the guitar has the sound Seattle Fuzz. There's also a hairstyle called Seattle's Finest, which is probably a reference to Nirvana once again, with the hairstyle resembling that of Kurt Cobain's. Also, there's a loading screen that'll occasionally say "move away from the mic to breathe," which is a reference to the classic Chocolate Rain song. There are a few interesting Easter eggs that have popped up from the Assassin's Creed series over the years, starting way back in Assassin's Creed 1 when some people thought that this building structure kind of resembled Optimus Prime from Transformers. I can kind of see it, I guess. There was this interesting Ghosts of the Past type vision that could happen in Assassin's Creed 2, and it was like this vision where the main character could like see his entire family. It's pretty cool, but it can only happen once, so I think this should count as an Easter egg, but I'm not 100% sure if it counts, but I wanted to include it. But that should count too. If that doesn't count, then here's this reference.
Do I know you from somewhere?
Don't you recognize me? It's a me, Mario!
In Assassin's Creed Brotherhood, there's this somewhat clever Metal Gear reference with like a cardboard box being a solid hiding place. In Assassin's Creed Revelations, there's this Easter egg where you fight this citizen, and if you defeat him 3 times in a row, he'll be like, oh, we'll call it a draw, all right? And that's a reference to Monty Python and the Holy Grail, where the Black Knight challenges King Arthur to a sword fight. After like both of the dude's arms are sliced off, he's like, oh, okay, we'll call it a draw. Assassin's Creed 3 actually has one of my favorite Easter eggs in the entire franchise, where for whatever reason, if you like follow a turkey around long enough and then enter the Konami code, which is like the up, down, left, right, BA button combination, the turkey will start eating, but also prove to be an assassin. Yep. He is technically, canonically an assassin. I don't know if that's how canon works, but nonetheless, we have the assassin turkey here, and I appreciate it. And this next one's not really a secret, but it's still interesting. But in the same Assassin's Creed game, there is like the headless horseman that makes its first appearance in the series here, something that kind of becomes a recurring theme in various Assassin's Creed games in the future. Moving on to Assassin's Creed 4, there's a clever reference here. In the mission Trust is Earned, John Cockram can be heard telling his soldiers to pick up your socks and grab your which is a reference to the scene from Full Metal Jacket. And now we get to the final Assassin's Creed game to release, Assassin's Creed Rogue. There's a couple of interesting ones, like once again, the Headless Horseman makes an appearance. There's an Easter egg referencing the Prince of Persia game series, which Prince of Persia was what eventually led to the creation of the Assassin's Creed series. You can see his little figurine over here. But there are multiple missions across Assassin's Creed Rogue with these specific names: The Way the Wind Blows, One Little Victory, Free Will, The Color of Right, Circumstances, Armor and Sword, Scars, Bravado, and Cold Fire, and all of them are names of songs by the band Rush. Bonus points for Caress of Steel, which is the title of a Rush album as well. So Duke Nukem Forever was a game that finally released after so many years in development, and along the way there were a lot of Easter eggs sprinkled throughout this game, and references, and a ton of other things. We obviously can't include all of them, but here are the ones that we found most interesting. Duke's password for the turret is 1138, which is a common Easter egg in all of George Lucas's movies, so to see it pop up here is kind of clever. In Las Vegas, there's a soldier that's like complaining about how he had to help find his friend's wife, which is like making fun of one of the main plot points of Gears of War 1.
I just got back from helping my friend find his wife. Christ, what a
They do a play on Halo here where Duke is offered power armor, but he does not want it, which is like kind of making fun of the Halo series.
Duke, we've got your green power armor over here and ready to go.
Power armor is for
Well, okay. You want a gun instead?
There's also the whole part where Duke is with Dylan and this other soldier named Jenkins, and Jenkins runs ahead and ends up getting killed, and you can hear Duke say, "Damn it, Leroy," which is a reference to that infamous World of Warcraft video from back in the day. When you're in Duke's Titty City, there's a couple interesting references here, like in the employees only room where the security camera is. There's a top here that's spinning forever, a reference to the movie Inception. On Dam Top, there's a really clever reference to GoldenEye for the Nintendo 64, or the movie, I guess, where Duke dives off the top of the dam. We did talk about the Master Chief homage in Duke Nukem Forever, but there are a couple of other helmets as well. There's this one referencing Dead Space, and also this one, which is a Psycho referencing the Borderlands series. Throughout Dishonored, there's like a loudspeaker that constantly blares out propaganda about different things that have happened over the course of the story so far, and how you play through the story will affect how some of the dialogue is spoken. But in the 5th level of the game, you can actually find the announcer and kill him, and from there they find a new person to announce some of the happenings, and the new person voicing the announcements is the late and legendary Carrie Fisher.
Please prepare for a temporary disruption in city government services. Remain alert for further details.
You might remember there's a section where you can explore the hideout of the Whalers gang, and there's like some initiates trying to learn the art of stealth and whatnot. And there's some dialogue here that lines up with the tutorial mission from Thief the Dark Project.
For your next trial, you must move unseen. Stay in shadow.
You must learn how to move unseen. Stay in the shadows.
A cool nod to the Thief games, because Dishonored at the time was kind of like the natural evolution of what the old Thief games were. Not the, bad Xbox One, PS4 Thief game.
The Borderlands franchise started in 2009 with Borderlands 1. So there's a couple of Easter eggs from this game that I remembered from back in the day. Like this waving claptrap that you can find in the mountains in Firestone, or the secret vending machine that sometimes has really good weapons and gear that you can find close to Marcus's shop in New Haven. There also was these QR code posters that would show up all across Pandora, and I remember wondering if the QR code leads to anything. I mean, I never tried it back in the day, but there's actually 5 different QR codes. Now, the first one you can find on a postcard and it says Nick Wilson Ho-Oh. Nick Wilson was an artist on the game, so he put this little Easter egg in, I assume. The second QR code reads Marcus Munitions Inc., unauthorized retailer of everything that goes boom. I guess a little advertisement for Marcus's store. Then another QR code just leads to gearboxsoftware.com, and also there's one that leads to borderlandsthegame.com as well. But there's another one that actually reads Claptrap was here, which obviously is a reference to Claptrap, and I guess he left these behind and he's like, I was here. And Marcus's shop in T-Bone Junction, you can find this little car with like a little man inside. You can actually interact with him and he will say,
Hey, you see my gun? Hey, you see my gun? Hey, you see my gun?
In Moxie's establishment, you can find this shelf that has a bunch of little references and figures and hats and stuff like that that reference different things from the Borderlands universe. If you teleport to the underpass in Rust Commons West and then spawn in a car and take it to this spot by this tower and then go behind it, you'll find this death chest that probably was left there on accident, but it'll actually have really decent loot for your first playthrough. Also during the quest line, another piece of the puzzle, you can find this blue hut in New Haven that can be entered and it has an elevator that'll take you to the basement. In the basement, you'll find the unique weapon, the Rider, which cannot be acquired any other way, and you're only able to access this area during the quest. When Borderlands 2 came out, they definitely stepped up their Easter egg game, and also stepped up their parodying or, making little references to other games, or pop culture things, like this blue screen of death that you can find, which reads, so, hate to be the bearer of bad news, but your system's pretty hosed. Maybe if you download less of that illegal Truxian corn, your machine wouldn't be all jacked up. You should probably be embarrassed. If this is the first time you're seeing this, then it's only because no one else caught you yet. Tell you what's gonna happen here. You're going to put the new graphics SIC card in me and scrap SIC, that gunk, off my keyboard. And then maybe your search history won't accidentally be mailed to your grandma. You picking up what I'm laying down? I mean, that's why you use incognito mode. Also, if you travel east in the Caustic Cavern, you can find a small island. It's actually a little hard to get to because you have to have a decent amount of health and shields to get through the toxic water. But if you make it, you can find this campfire with a sword in it, and you can find this lonesome guy called Solitaire, which is a reference to Dark Souls. Solitaire being a play on, I guess, Solaire of Astora, which if you never played Dark Souls is the Brace the Sun guy. I mean, you've probably seen this guy even if you have never played Dark Souls. Also, when you reach the island, you'll unlock the challenge I Bet I Can Make It, which is a challenge you can only do by finding this Easter egg. An achievement that's actually tied to an Easter egg is called What Does It Mean, which will unlock if you reach this cliff in the Highlands. A double rainbow will appear.
Oh, perfect double rainbow all the way. What does this mean?
Which obviously is a reference to that viral YouTube video from 2010, where the guy is like seeing the double rainbow and then he's like, what does this mean? Also before the game release, during the promotional phase at PAX East, they were doing like this Easter egg hunt in real life, where the winner would be able to pick an Easter egg that was put into the game. The person who got that ability decided to put this NPC in called Johnny Waffles, but as far as I can tell, there's no backstory behind the name Johnny Waffle. Maybe it's just a funny name, but the NPC himself is an Easter egg. Also, if you beat the game a second time on True Vault Hunter mode, which is like the New Game Plus mode in Borderlands 2. After a certain amount of story progression, if you head to Claptrap's place, you can find some gear in his fireplace called Geary's Unbreakable Gear. And the item description reads, only a brisk walk to the Iridium Bright will reward the courier. Now, this is actually a hint what you have to do to activate this Easter egg. You have to walk there. You cannot fast travel, you cannot die, you just have to get there in one life. And this is kind of a long walk, so you'll have to be careful to not die or get run over by enemies. Now, once you get to your destination, this psycho will appear called Geary, and he'll actually start walking towards the cliff and then jump into the lava. This is obviously a reference to Gollum jumping into the volcano in Lord of the Rings. After he actually jumps into the lava, a bunch of boxes will be dropped off and they have like really decent gear, but you can also farm this Geary guy for unique hats for each character. Also, a lot of people might remember this one, but there's a Minecraft Easter egg in Borderlands as well. You can find the entrance to a cave that's blocked off by Minecraft dirt, and if you start punching it, you'll actually be able to get inside the cave. Now, once in the cave, there'll actually be creepers attacking you and you get to shoot them. And there's even a creeper mini-boss. There's also ore blocks in this cave you can break. There's a coal ore, which will drop ammunition, then the gold ore will drop money, and the iridium ore, which is unique to Borderlands, will drop either iridium or a Minecraft-themed skin for your character. Also, there's multiple QR codes hidden in Borderlands 2 again. The first one will decode to the message Nick Wilson Ho-Oh, which is the same thing you could find in Borderlands 1. Then the second one will read, thank you so much for playing our game. Now I'm rich with love and money. Nick Wilson. Ditto. So Nick Wilson hit himself a couple times again in this game. And the third QR code will actually decode to wise men say, forgiveness is divine, but never pay full price for late pizza, Captain Picard. Which obviously, if you've ever seen Star Trek, is one of his famous lines. Also, you can find Roland's Facebook on multiple screens throughout the game, which first of all reveals that he had a relationship with Lilith, and also you can see Mordecai and Brick as his Facebook friends. Also in the bay near Main Street Reservoir, you can shoot these 5 barrels, and Patricia will once again pop up and be riding a fish. If you're specifically playing on console, you can type in the Konami code during the main menu, and this will add an extra option under gameplay settings called Extra Wubs. But I mean, the description literally reads, this does nothing, sorry. So I guess this does nothing. When Borderlands the pre-sequel released, they still filled it with a ton of pop culture references and Easter eggs. Once again, the QR codes return, and there's 2 this time. The first one decodes to Nick Wilson, and the second one decodes to Ho-Oh. So this time the whole Nick Wilson Ho-Oh message is just split up. During the final mission of the game, you can find a bunch of elevators. If you take the right elevator, it will lead you to this straight up Mario Brothers inspired area. A bunch of enemies will spawn, and if you take them all out, you'll be rewarded with some loot. If you're in Moxie's bar and you look at the DJs, they're very clearly inspired by Daft Punk. In Serenity's Waste, you can also find a secret boss called Ivajira, which is a similar sounding name to Gojira, which is obviously the Japanese name of Godzilla, and the boss himself actually resembles Godzilla as well. If you played NBA Jam back in the day, you might remember the on fire mechanic, which is actually something you can activate in Borderlands 2. During the side quest Boom Shakalaka, you get to slam dunk a ball, and if you do it, you'll be on fire. Also, if you pick up the quest Kill Mag, you have to eventually fight a Thresher in a trash compactor, and this is a reference to the Family Guy Star Wars episodes actually, where Mag is like the monster in the trash compactor. Also, there's a reference to Jesse Pinkman from Breaking Bad, where if you play as Claptrap during the mission Let's Build a Robot Army, he will say, Also, before Borderlands the pre-sequel was even announced, there was a little Easter egg hinting at this game in the trailer for Tales from the Borderlands. You can see this poster of Handsome Jack in front of the Hyperion station, and he's holding like the moon in between his fingers, if it's like small, because he's like far away. And this was in December of 2013, so 5 months before the pre-sequel was even officially announced. Also, while I'm on the topic of Tales from the Borderlands, it is also revealed that the fish that Patricia rides during those 2 Easter eggs is called Splurgold, the Flesh Slayer. It is described as 50 meters long and 4 meters thick, and also having awful breath.
Far Cry 3 had some clever Easter eggs. Besides things like an Assassin's Creed reference here and there's some funny moments like this seasick pirate who's having a rough time. When you're looting, there's a chance that you can get a ripped teddy bear item, and in the description, it references a torn label reading Bo B, which is a reference to the Simpsons character Mr. Burns' childhood bear, Bobo, if you've seen the Simpsons episode Rosebud. Also, if you try to set Far Cry 3 to the hardest difficulty, the master difficulty, the little text description says worse than malaria, which is a reference of the malaria mechanic from Far Cry 2, which was not really that popular of a mechanic. And then there's a clever reference to Call of Duty Modern Warfare, where in the mission Fly South, Willis says that he has plans to leave Rock Island and join up with Task Force 141.
Jason, I haven't heard from you in a while. Thought you were leaving the island.
Nope. I'm staying here.
Not me. This Russia operation's blown wide open. I'm joining Task Force 141 flying out tonight. It was nice working with you.
Which is obviously the Modern Warfare Task Force. The game Dead Island surprisingly has a lot of Easter eggs hidden in this game. Like, a lot. For instance, the trophies reference a ton of various forms of media. Like, one of the achievements is called Gotta Find 'Em All, a reference to Pokemon. Another one called No Raccoons in Here, a reference to Resident Evil. How many days exactly? A reference to 28 days later, especially because you have to get the achievement after playing the game 28 days after starting it. There's Can't Touch This, which is, a reference to the MC Hammer song. There's Tis But a Flesh Wound, a reference to the Black Knight scene from Monty Python and the Holy Grail, again. There's Right for Life, a reference to Left 4 Dead. And honestly, there's just a ton of other references in the achievements alone. Besides the achievements, there's a ton of other little references. There's license plates that read Dead Island, but in Leet speak. You can find the little family, from the trailer that was super viral back in the day, just chilling inside of the hotel. They're fine. There's some guy over here whose name is Ted B, and he's like kneeling in what appears to be a blood-stained pool. I wonder what he's been up to. At every single gas station, the gas prices are set to $6.66. Towards the beginning of the game, there is an Oceanic Flight 1012 that crashes, and then there's like a hatch over at this lifeguard tower. Both of these are references to the TV series Lost. Lost even used the same flight company, Oceanic Airlines, as the name. There's an abandoned house that has the infamous "Don't Open Dead Inside" sign, which is like, you know, an homage to The Walking Dead. In Dead Island Riptide, there's a couple of little interesting things. Like, for instance, they have a reference to the Borderlands series by having this little Borderlands-inspired zombie come running at you. And later on in the game, you can find this shack that is a little creepy, but it does look like this is potentially like a reference to Jason here. His little shack that he must live in when he's not, you know, doing his Friday the 13th things the rest of the year that he's out. And while we were unsure whether or not to include this game, Destiny 1 released in 2014, which was after the Xbox One and PS4 released, and there were a couple of clever Easter eggs, like the building that looks like Master Chief. They obviously can't do like a full-on Halo Easter egg here because they were no longer associated with Microsoft and Halo, but they put something clever here. There were these like 7 coins hidden around the tower, which were a part of like Bungie's big secret number with the number 7. There was also a little jukebox Easter egg where it would play like various songs associated with Destiny, but there was a remix of Siege of Madrigal, which was like that Bungie song that had appeared in every Halo game, and it even appeared in Myth before Halo. The Mass Effect series had some interesting Easter eggs along the way as well. The first one releasing all the way back in 2007, but does anyone else remember the old shifty looking cow? It was this cow, and he is shifty. Then over in Mass Effect 2 in Hawk's Vault, you can actually see a few references to the other Dragon Age games, the games that were developed by BioWare as well. Then over in Mass Effect 3, if you go to Mars and you look at these solar panels in the correct order, eventually this little robot dude will roll out and say, "What's up?" Kind of cool. There's also a console that you can continue to interact with, and a soldier will ask you to stop touching it, but if you keep touching it, eventually he gives in a bit and lets you know about it.
Once more, the Solarian Union formally requests that you not touch that. Fine. If you are so enamored of that object, then I suggest you get your own feces analyzer.
So Elijah left on a trip for Japan like a couple days ago, and he didn't record an outro, so I'm just gonna wing it right here. Well, anyways, thanks so much to our Patreon and YouTube members. If you enjoyed this, make sure you subscribe. Even if you're on television, it takes a couple extra steps, but we really appreciate it. We'll see you guys next time with another video.